We never know where life will lead us or what may hinder us along the way. But while every day can feel like one big question mark, it doesn't have to. With the right insights, strategies, and solutions from Western and Southern Financial Group, together we can look ahead to leave the unknown behind.
What's Pro Football Focus doing? Last week they had Brady. This week they got Brady.
We're literally doing it differently from everybody else.
As a matter of fact, moving forward from this point on, I will not make reference to PFF.
Do you not understand that they are that way because you're Joe Flacco?
And you just like to discredit things that people deserve credit for.
That you can't possibly be expected to defend that.
Talk about the game, Sam.
So,
who cares about what people think about us?
Yeah, I like football, I like football season, all the things that go with
it. Welcome into the PFF NFL Podcast. Steve Palazzolo back here with Sam Monson, and we are going back to our favorite series, Fixing Your Team in 5 minutes. It's the AFC North and AFC West edition. We already hit on the AFC East and the South on a previous episode, and then next week we'll get to the NFC.
Mm-hmm.
Sound good?
5 minutes.
LOL JK.
Yeah.
Right, that's what we got. Again, just to remind people, we did have great intentions last year around this time. We were going to do all 32 teams. We were going to do it in 5 minutes, and then we just got off the rails on the first team and decided, all right, let's just go. We can only fit in 8 teams per episode. That's it. So here we are. We want to give every team proper love. Before we get into it, we're at the combine, but we're also in the studio. Just giving it away.
Yeah,
we're in the studio, but we're also in Indianapolis at the moment. So right now you're getting like live coverage from the combine as well because we're over there. And then we've got our charity update. We don't have the official numbers because, we just don't.
No. But
you have a charity tweets. And so do I.
Yeah.
And they're going head to head.
Go to our pinned tweets at PFF_Sam or at PFF_Steve. I think we're also throwing the links to the GoFundMes into the YouTube description. Go donate money. They're both for a very good cause, and the winner will be doing something ridiculous, whether it's you running combine drills or me recreating a TikTok dance. That's the update.
That's it. That's the update?
Yeah.
Well, we'll see if by record time I'm still working from behind here, but I need some help. We need the people to rally behind our charity, Heritage House, and watching me doing the combine drills that you'll be watching here this week. So appreciate everybody who's already donated, who's already been a part of this, and we appreciate the fact that we can continue to do charity drives because our great viewers and listeners always get involved. We'll see who gets to that 2,500 first. All right, you ready to get into it?
Yep.
All right, let's do it. Starting the AFC North, the Baltimore Ravens. We got to fix the Baltimore Ravens in 5 or more minutes. A team that, when I look at their offensive depth chart, Sam, only 2 official starters not coming back. Bradley Bozeman, their starting center. Patrick Ricard at fullback. But, I mean, really, they've added a ton to their offense the last couple of years. Again, we'll see what happens with Ali Villanueva at right tackle. One of the things that they need to get sorted is Lamar Jackson and his long-term prospects there. But the offense has a lot of people coming back. Defense, got a lot of defensive linemen. A lot of people in the front 7, basically, that they need to replace. So where are we starting as far as fixing the Baltimore Ravens?
At what point does the Lamar Jackson thing get kind of weird? Why isn't that done yet?
I don't know. I mean, there's reasons for Baker Mayfield. So the comparisons here: Josh Allen,
done.
He's signed, sealed, delivered
a long time ago.
Baker Mayfield, there's reasons.
Yes,
right.
Many, in fact.
Uneven performance combined with injury. With Lamar, you would think Lamar would be closer to that Josh Allen range, unless it's just the Ravens are.
Remember, Lamar
slow playing it a little bit.
Lamar was a unanimous MVP in the same year that Josh Allen still wasn't good.
Yeah.
And now, like, Allen breaks out, has an incredible year. He gets the bag. Lamar's still waiting. Like Kyler Murray is a year. It's just 1 year, right?
He's 1 year after those guys. Yeah.
Younger in NFL experience terms, and he's agitating for the money.
He's already got his agent putting out all caps terms and conditions out on Twitter.
Right. Like he wants the cash, and he's a year earlier in the process than Lamar, who has an MVP under his belt.
I think it always – remember, the Dak thing lasted a while because I think Dak had specific wants and needs. So, right? I think Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes very distinctly and clearly said, I want the long-term. Give me the long-term deal. I want to be here forever, right? Dak never officially came out and said, I want to be a Cowboy forever. I think he was playing it a little bit closer to like Cousins did, which was kind of like, I want to maximize every dollar.
But Dak
and hit
also,
free agency earlier.
Dak also never hit the heights that Lamar has hit. Like, remember, I know this specifically because there's a video that people keep throwing at us where we said that Dak Prescott isn't worth $30 million a year, right?
Right.
At the time, like Dak Prescott's career performance has gone very closely correlated to how good his supporting cast has been around him, which is a pretty big red flag for a quarterback where you need to hand this guy a giant sum of money and all of a sudden you can't surround him with an elite level of supporting cast. So when you're weighing up how much money do we really want to give Dak Prescott thing, and this is back before CeeDee Lamb and those guys are there, and his supporting cast wasn't quite as stellar as it is right now, that was a real concern. Like, do you really want to give this guy $45 million a year? And at the time, our answer was no. Given the situation since, it's changed, right? He's played better than that before. Anyway, whatever. The point being...
Market's different, yeah.
Right. The values generally have gone up. So the point being, though, Dak has never been a unanimous MVP. Like, Dak has never shown the high-end level of play that Lamar Jackson has. He's already hit levels beyond where Dallas were wondering if Dak could get to.
At the same time, you took my comparison and equated it a little bit. Don't do that. We don't do that. Bring back the only thing I was trying to say was Dak had different goals than, say, Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes. Does Lamar have different goals than those guys? Does he want to be the guy that's going to get, say, just give me $40 million for 3 years, right? 3 years, $120 million, and I'm ready to hit free agency again in 3 years or 4 years or whatever it is? Or does he want to be the long-term guy? The other question is, I don't know how viable. So what's the most common criticism about Lamar Jackson and signing him long-term? It's durability, right? It was kind of a freak injury that ended his 2021 season, right? It wasn't whatever the ankle, it was just an ankle injury on a screen where he was just buying time to get the ball off or whatever. But I think people assume when you run the ball that many times, you take that many hits or whatever, that you're going to be less durable. Lamar, for the most part, has been extremely durable. But is that one of the questions that the Ravens have? How long can he keep a high run, I don't want to say run first style, but high run style? And how long do we want to invest in that? Is that a 4-year thing? Can it be a 7-year thing? How long do you want to actually do that? I don't know if that's all part of it, but the Ravens are a pretty shrewd organization. But I also think Lamar has perhaps slightly different goals where he's not sprinting to the table for the 10-year, $45 million contract. Do you think the Ravens are hesitating? Because after his MVP season, Lamar's last 2 seasons have been less good.
Yeah. I mean, maybe. I think that the Ravens unquestionably buy into everything Lamar Jackson.
Agreed.
So I'm just at this point starting to become confused as to why that hasn't translated to the long-term contract. I think everyone assumed he'd locked up the second he won MVP.
So we're the Ravens. Are we locking up Lamar long-term?
I mean, yeah, at some point.
I'm probably paying him top 5 money and get him locked up for 5 years. Let's do that.
Okay.
Okay?
Done.
You taking that, Lamar? All right. So we know we're building around Lamar. Last year at this time, we're saying, man, your favorite statement. What does this offense look like with a wide receiver 1? They still might not have that guy, but it's the best group of receivers that they've had with Rashad Bateman, Marquise Brown, I think, right? Sammy Watkins gone. Do you go back to that well? Do you go back to receiver and just add even more weapons there for the Ravens?
Potentially. I mean, I think they have a good starting group now, but the depth would be a little bit of a concern. Bateman, Marquise Brown, Duvernay is an interesting piece. Mark Andrews is kind of like, they're a little bit like the 49ers, where it's like, do they have a number one receiver? It's like, yes, but it isn't at wide
Mark
receiver.
Andrews.
Right.
Yeah.
Mark Andrews is their real number one guy. So between that group, you have, I think, a very interesting collection of receivers. Remember, they're also going to get like their entire backfield back as well. So J.K. Dobbins out of the backfield, I think, is an interesting receiving option as well as what he can do on the ground. So I think they're good. But yeah, if you're saying like, would they have space for an extra receiver? Absolutely.
In my recent mock draft, I gave them Tyler Linderbaum, the center out of Iowa, at 14 overall. I explained it on Monday's podcast. This is a way to expand the Ravens' rushing attack. I think that would be great. You just solidify that offensive line even further, fills one of the holes that you have, but also you can expand the running game, run more zone stuff, take advantage of that skill set a little bit more. I would lean that way as a potential option, but the front seven, as we mentioned earlier, the defense definitely needs a look. Calais Campbell is one of the better free agents on the market, but he's older, right? I mean, that's, he's not a slam dunk to come back. Brandon Williams, big nose tackle, Josh Bynes, linebacker, Justin Houston, all of those guys hitting free agency. They need an influx of youth, particularly along that defensive front this offseason.
Yeah, I mean, I think the entire defense, they're going to end up with a good starting 11 again, but defense needs depth. And when you start to look at where the depth is for Baltimore, I think it gets a lot more sketchy. They'll get some players back from injury. The secondary was decimated just as the backfield on offense was. So they'll get, those players back. But yeah, there isn't a defensive position they get addressed that would be a bad move. Like they need at least a contingency plan at pretty much every spot right now.
We've talked a lot about Jordan Davis, the big nose tackle out of Georgia. He'd be a great fit for them, not at 14. That's the tricky part, like having him replace Brandon Williams. They are a team that likes to stop the run with, the big boys up front. They still play those odd fronts. Jordan Davis would be a nice fit. I just don't know if it's going to match up for when they pick. But if they had an option in the second round, I think that would be a great fit. That also makes me think the second round equivalent is Travis Jones out of UConn, 6'5", 333. He's one guy I would take a look at if I'm the Ravens. So if I went Linderbaum, is this too run heavy? Linderbaum round 1, Travis Jones round 2 out of UConn, maybe fill that nose tackle spot. I think those would be very Ravens-like moves here. And because we've talked a lot about the interior defensive line, free agent class isn't great. I don't think you're going to replace. You either bring Brandon Williams back on the cheap, or you're not going to replace him with anybody great in free agency.
No, but there's a lot of Ravens type players, I think, that could do that in free agency. So obviously your guy Lorenzo Fatukasi is available. Yeah. He would be a good. I don't think he's going to have a strong market. Like he didn't have a good year last year, which doesn't help.
New system, didn't have a great year.
He was incredibly good against the run. The two previous seasons, offers pretty much nothing as a pass rusher, and isn't hitting free agency coming off a good year at all. It was a down season for him. So I think he's going to have a pretty slow, inexpensive marketplace, at which point a team like Baltimore snagging him, bringing him in, and being able to replace Brandon Williams with his run stuffing is potentially a really good move. Or they get into that market of these lower down situational guys that aren't going to cost an awful lot, whether it's Tim Settle from Washington, Harrison Phillips from Buffalo. There are guys lower down this free agent group that could fill that role for Baltimore for not much money.
I wonder if Campbell's market is going to be that big either. He's going to be 35 for next year. Is he? Our prediction is 1 year, $8 million for Calais Campbell. That's your hired gun, 1 year contract type of guy. Still had an 80 grade last year. Still 8th among all interior defensive linemen, 10th most valuable interior defensive lineman over the last 2 years. I would make a play to try to bring him back at that.
Sure.
If I'm the Ravens, he's going to fit. He can play multiple roles there. But Campbell and maybe who you mentioned, Fatukasi, I feel pretty good about the run defense there. And we always talk about the division, right? The Browns are going to run the ball. Bengals, you want to be able to push that offensive line, that interior offensive line around. The Steelers want to run the ball. We'll see if they get around to it, but it doesn't hurt to have those big boys if you're the Ravens. All right, so we've got that. Got some options on the defensive front there. The other place I think they need to look, I always look at the secondary, of course, but Marcus Peters heads into the last year of his contract, and this was something 2 years ago I was like, the Ravens need to keep drafting corners, because you want to have that next replacement. I could see them going corner kind of high here too. If we're talking at 14, where I went Linderbaum, if there are good first-round caliber corners available there, you got Marlon Humphrey as the guy to build around in that secondary. He's locked up, but Peters heads in. He's got a lot of money, and he heads into the last year of his contract. It's time to look to the future there if you're Baltimore.
Yeah, and I think it's probably an area where there will be value, like the middle of the first round. Cornerback feels like a pretty good spot. We think that guys like Derek Stingley and Sauce Gardner will be gone earlier than that. They'll be gone somewhere in the top half of the draft. But that mid-round or mid-first round, you've got probably a selection of guys. McDuffie we're very high on, but just his size, I think he probably lasts as long as that. Andrew Booth Jr. from Clemson.
McDuffie I'm less high on in a man-heavy scheme like the Ravens.
Yeah, and I just think there's enough teams that are going to be either scared or don't think he's a good fit in their scheme that he's not. I mean, we have him as our number 8 guy overall on the draft board, right? I mean, just from the things that would scare teams, I'd say he lasts till the second half of the first round.
I would spend a lot of time and effort and resources in trashing Derek Stingley. Really attack his character, his workouts, all that stuff, and hope that he falls to 14. Is that bad? It's one way to fix the Ravens.
You don't even need to trash his character. Just put out there like all of the data of tiny corners.
I'm saying Stingley.
Oh, Stingley. Sorry.
I want Stingley to fall, not McDuffie.
Okay. Yeah.
Stingley,
that feels like a reach.
Might be too much.
Yeah. I don't know.
Maybe if I'm at 7 or 8, I'll still do that.
Yeah.
I would not attack his character. That would be wrong. Anyway, I think corner could definitely be in play there, though. If the right fit's there.
Yeah. The Stingley thing is interesting, though, because, incredible freshman year and hasn't got back to there yet in terms of play or injury. He's been beat up the last couple of years. But because of everything we know about cornerback play and how volatile it is year to year and just how susceptible to change it is, just the fact that he's shown that level of play, I think is kind of all you need.
Yeah.
Like the fact that the injuries are one thing. Like obviously he needs to check out medically and you need to be comfortable that those are just injuries that have come up rather than there's an actual lasting problem here. But the fact that he hasn't reached that level of play again, particularly given he's been injured, I don't think should really scare you about it because most cornerbacks won't get there in the first place. Like the fact that he's reached that pinnacle of play shows you that the capacity is there. And like we're not looking at last season and saying Marlon Humphrey's no longer a great corner because he had a bad year. Right? We know that that's what happens to corners, right? Sometimes you run up against Jamar Chase and the guy eats your lunch. Like Marlon Humphrey had a rough year last year, but he's still a high-end elite level corner. And the fact that he's shown that before means you have confidence he can get back there. Same with, Stephon Gilmore had years where he wasn't as good as his elite shutdown year. I mean, that happens to every single corner. So I think there is an opportunity for teams maybe to pounce on a guy like Derek Stingley sliding down the draft because he hasn't played at the peak of his powers for like 2 years. But the fact that he's done it in the first place, to me, says you should probably just grab him.
Yeah, I would take that shot with Stingley. Probably not available there at 14 for the Ravens. The other spot that I think needs a look, so Deshaun Elliott, their starting free safety. He is a free agent. The other safety is Chuck Clark. He plays kind of all over the place. They need a true free safety to run this system in Baltimore. I don't know if the rumor's already been started. I may be stealing this, but Tyrann Mathieu out there. I think I've seen him linked with Baltimore. If not, breaking news. Tyrann Mathieu could be a future Baltimore Raven. I love that as a potential fit at free safety. If you want to go, if you want to invest at the safety position, if you want to go a little bit cheaper, using the PFF free agent board, by the way, you get 25% off all of our great stuff using the promo code NFL Pod. But on the free agent board, number 106 is Xavier Woods, a guy that our guy Brad Spielberger projects to make, 2 years, about $5.25 million per year. So I love that as a potential fit. Xavier Woods, a guy that could play free safety, play in and around the box if needed. But Xavier Woods could be the cheaper free safety option if they don't make a play to bring Deshaun Elliott back.
We're going to need some, not some creative accounting. We're just going to need to free up some space if we're going to make a move for a Tyrann Mathieu.
Yeah, I understand. Where does Baltimore stand right now, cap-wise?
They're not good right now, but they're a team that can free up a decent chunk of change. So right now, they only have a couple of $1 million worth of space, but they can free up some.
All right, well, then I would go the cheap route. So Xavier Woods, I'd side Xavier Woods to play free safety. We're going to bring in Fatukasi and bring back Calais Campbell. So we're feeling pretty good about the defensive front. I'm drafting Linderbaum in the first round at center. What else about this roster? What do the Ravens need to do to beat the division champion Cincinnati Bengals? Because the Ravens still might be the favorites going into next year.
I mean,
by the way,
the big thing is they need Lamar Jackson to bounce back. Like, as good as Lamar Jackson has been and unanimous MVP and all those things, he wasn't playing well last year, even before he got hurt. And there wasn't actually a big difference between Lamar Jackson at quarterback, Tyler Huntley at quarterback, even Josh Johnson at quarterback when he came in. That can't be the case. This whole thing is built on the shoulders of Lamar Jackson. They actually need Lamar Jackson to be playing like Lamar Jackson if they're going to be good. And if you look at his grading last year, like from memory, it started off very good and then just fell off an absolute cliff and got consistently worse as the season went on. Like week 5, he's got 3 straight grades of 80 plus in a game. And then we had a couple of 69. Then we went down to 59 and then 50 and then 40s. Like it's bizarre drop off in performance.
So going back to that 14th pick and then say the second rounder, when the if you're the Ravens, do you go back to 2019 and say, okay, how do we replicate the MVP season? Which, by the way, you had like Nick Boyle and Mark Andrews and Hayden Hurst. It was a very tight end driven system. They still have Boyle, they still have Andrews, of course. Do you go back? Do you look at like Jeremy Ruckert is a guy I look at in the middle of the rounds of the draft, tight end out of Ohio State who can play in the run game. Do you just attack tight end? Or would you actually look, like if you added a Drake London or one of those Ohio State receivers to this offense, do you go the receiver route? Like what are we doing to extract maximum value out of Lamar Jackson? Even though they already went Rashad Bateman last year, do you go back to that well and say Bateman and Marquise Brown and another receiver, a big-bodied option like a London or another? What is the best way to do it? I'm intrigued by going back to the tight end situation. I don't think there's great tight ends around the NFL that are needle movers, but having another option opposite Andrews, having that run pass ability, the play action game, all the things that a good tight end brings you is intriguing. I'm also intrigued by what's another receiver look like in this offense.
I mean, I think a big thing is getting that offensive line back to being a strength rather than a potential problem. Last year, obviously, Ronnie Stanley basically didn't play.
Right.
Played week 1, not healthy, was disastrous, and was immediately shut down and didn't get on the field again. So if Ronnie Stanley comes back as one of the best left tackles in the game again, that's a huge thing for them. Kevin Zeitler was a good pickup for them, but all of a sudden you're talking about like 2/5 of this offensive line are definitely, well, not even definitely, because Ronnie Stanley, who knows if he's healthy again. Like 2/5 of the offensive line, in theory, on paper, should be fine, should be good. The other 3/5, we don't know yet. Patrick McCarry, I think, played pretty well, reasonably well at right tackle. You could, if he's a starter there, you're fine. But, this offensive line at its best was a dominant unit that was being helped by Lamar Jackson and the system that they were running. When at some point it became bad enough that those things were no longer enhancing it, and it was just not a good line. And I'm sure that had a big impact on Lamar Jackson's play. So, I mean, I think a real big thing they need to do is to just continue to hammer on that offensive line. And, maybe a guy like Ben Cleveland takes a step up, develops with experience, but that's a big thing I think that they do need to address.
Got a stat for you to back you up.
Okay.
Been doing some team-based studies here historically. In the PFF era, the 2019 Ravens offensive line created the most WAR, the most wins above replacement of any other team. That was Lamar's MVP year. So it was them, followed by, a couple Eagles. Like the Eagles always are up there because they've had some really good lines. But the Ravens, it was MVP Lamar, and he was fantastic. But the line was at a different level. And the tight ends were at a different level. The tight ends were 9th best in history. So if you want to go back to that, I do think looking at the offensive line would be smart because they're dependent upon more than other offensive lines, especially in the run game. As much as Lamar affects the run game, when those guys are blocking it up, they're creating 6 yards per carry, 5.5 yards per carry, and that's Ravens football. So that's why I'm going Linderbaum, even though he might not be the perfect scheme fit, and then maybe take a look at guards as well. All right, do we fix the Ravens?
Yeah.
Ish? No, it's always ish. I mean, we're just putting suggestions out there. You can only we just need the teams to take these suggestions. Fixed. Ravens. Don't forget the PFF NFL podcast is sponsored by the Western and Southern Financial Group. While you focus on these roster moves, Western and Southern helps advance your money moves. Buying your first home, planning to start a family, wondering how to make your money grow? Western and Southern's playbook of life insurance, investment, and retirement solutions helps you rest assured on game day. Team up to understand needs and address goals with a game plan built just for you. Get started at westernsouthern.com/PFF. All right, Cincinnati Bengals, the hometowners. They're next on our fixing series. Don't forget, we're going to fix the Rams too. I saw people get offended, like, oh, you're going to fix this team? They were good. We're doing this for every team. Every team needs to make moves this offseason. So we're going team by team. The Bengals, of course, all the talk is going to be on the offensive line. That's not the only issue, but how are we getting the Bengals offensive line back on track?
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously the biggest issue. It wasn't as bad last season as it looked by the end of the year because they got banged up, and guys like Riley Reif, who were brought in as part of fixing it, as part of creeping back to what average, were hurt and not playing. So all of a sudden, your right side is Hakeem Adeniji, it's Isaiah Prince, and those guys are just getting wrecked on a weekly basis. And then you roll into the Super Bowl where they've got to face Aaron Donald and Von Miller. And so clearly it was going to look horrendous, even if it wasn't maybe quite that bad. Right. But you've got Jonah Williams right now is your one good player. You drafted Jackson Carman last year. We don't know yet. Like, the only thing we can really say about Jackson Carman is that he wasn't an obvious upgrade over Hakeem Adeniji in the playoffs. And that's problematic because if he had been, he absolutely would have nailed down that starting spot already. And maybe you could say, all right, 2 out of 5 spots. Trey Hopkins at center, like, he's not good, but if he's your weakest link, maybe we can work. So you got to find a couple of guards. You got to find a right tackle. There you go.
They have cap space to work with.
Yeah.
Last year they brought in Riley Reif on a 1-year contract. He's also a free agent. I could see them spending money on the guard position. And then if you're just, even if you brought back like a Riley Reif at right tackle, I'd rather have a more long-term option, but the Bengals have the money to go double investment at 2 starting spots there.
Yeah.
And I think if they went right guard and right tackle, that'd be fine. I know people always look at the top of the free agent list, right? So the top tackle's Teron Armstead. I don't know if that'd be the play there, just going for the best player, because you'd have to have Armstead at left tackle with his injury concerns from the last few years. Last year he played only 468 snaps. He's been fairly durable other than that. But that'd be the home run play. You'd have to move Jonah Williams to right tackle. And when you do that in the middle of someone's NFL career, that's risky. So I would look for a right tackle. Everybody gets Morgan Moses. So Morgan Moses would be a good option, but that's short term. Riley Reif would be a short term option. You could look to the draft there. But this is why I'm thinking maybe guards the place to spend a little bit more money. And does that end up being Brandon Scherf, who hits the market once again?
Scherf would be really interesting. He's also, like, he was a player that at draft time people were talking about could maybe play right tackle as well.
He was a tackle at Iowa.
Yeah.
And when the Washington team drafted him, because they weren't the Commanders then.
Right.
They, at 6, I think there was still a question if he was going to play tackle.
Yes.
Sorry to interrupt.
So, and again, it's a similar story too. I don't know if you want to do that in the middle of the guy's career, but it would give you an intriguing option in addition to just being able to plug him in and being obviously the best guard you have on the roster. It's Orlando Brown is another interesting name because he's supposedly going to be a free agent. Given what the Chiefs traded to get him, it seems kind of crazy that they might let him walk. Like it would be accepting a giant sunk cost, which is not something the teams typically like doing. So you have to assume that the Chiefs want to bring him back. If they don't, though, he's out there. He has experience at right tackle, left Baltimore because he doesn't want to play right tackle. So I'm not sure if that's workable anyway.
Right.
Scherf would be intriguing. The only thing that would make me hesitate throwing money at Scherf is that I think guard is actually a really deep position in this free agent group. And you could take the money that it would cost you to sign Brandon Scherf and divide that amongst a couple of guards and solidify both spots. And
both are an issue, by the way. Quentin Spain is a free agent, so
yeah,
you want to upgrade at right guard and replace left guard.
Right. So if you bring in somebody like Connor Williams, and Williams is a really interesting player because Dallas fans hate him. Like Dallas fans cannot stand Connor Williams because he's not as good as the all-pros on the offensive line, right?
Yeah.
Next to Tyron Smith and before when it was Travis Frederick and then Zach Martin and Lyle Collins, he is the weakest link on that offensive line, but he's still like a decent, serviceable starting caliber guard. Like he's a decent player. He's a solid starter, but solid starters in today's NFL get beat quite a lot.
Right. His bad plays are ugly. So
yeah.
There are enough ugly plays to criticize Connor Williams.
But he would be an upgrade over like half the teams in the NFL at that spot. So, and if you're Cincinnati, you're a team that's coming from a pretty low ebb on the offensive line. He absolutely represents a significant upgrade. But because he isn't, that great a player, he probably doesn't cost that much money either. So you can grab a guy like Connor Williams, 100% upgrade your offensive line, and still have plenty of money left over to go and snag a right guard as well.
I'm always intrigued by the players that, Brad Spielberger, our cap expert, puts together these projected contracts. They're very heavily driven by WAR, but by the market and other metrics, age and all that stuff. He has Connor Williams making far less money than other guards on the list, like Laken Tomlinson and James Daniels, certainly less than Brandon Scherf. So my guess there is that the league is lower on Connor Williams than we are. We have him as the number 11 guard from a grading standpoint last year, number 16 in 2020. To me, he's that classic, he gets better every year. He's still only 25 years old, not even 25 years old right now. Like Austin Corbett, who's also a free agent on this list, continues to improve and get better. If Connor Williams is available as cheap as Brad has projected him, 3 years of almost $7 million per year, I think that is a slam dunk, and I would rather that. You can get a Connor Williams and Alex Kappa, say, almost for Brandon Scherf money. We can get 2 free agent guards, which I think is huge for the Bengals. I think guard value is closer to tackle value than we had anticipated. When you really break it down, with our numbers at least, I would get Connor Williams and Alex Kappa, say, as examples, and then maybe look to tackle in the draft.
Yeah, and those I think are definitely 2 good examples. I think double dipping in free agency at guard is definitely the way I would go. And whether it's Alex Kappa, whether it's somebody like Austin Corbett, I think there are players there. You can sign 2 solid starting caliber offensive linemen, lock up your guard spots, and okay, those guys might not still be great, but that's not what we're trying to achieve with this Bengals offensive line. We're just trying to get it to being passable so that there isn't this catastrophic weak link in there. That would lock up 3/5 of your offensive line. We already said that if Hopkins is your weak link at center, you're probably okay. So now you can head into the draft with the freedom of essentially just needing to snag a right tackle from somewhere. And that's not a bad place to be.
So let's say we do that. Some intriguing names in the draft. I don't know if the back end of the first round has enough tackles available. Bernhard Ryman from Central Michigan, we have him at 15 on the draft board. He didn't have a great Senior Bowl. He might be available late there, but I think he's going higher. Trevor Penning from Northern Iowa, I think he's going higher. I'm interested in their draft board. There's a drop-off from Penning at 24 to Darian Kennard from Kentucky at 60. A lot of people like him at guard. He's 6'5", 345, but he's got multiple years of elite tackle grades in the SEC. He's one of those I want him to fail at tackle before I move him type of guys. I would, if you don't get both guards, I would draft Kennard and try to play him at right tackle, and then see if I had to move him to guard, could do that. Kellen Diesch from Arizona State, number 73 on our board, good pass protector, 6'7". Tyler Smith, an intriguing name from Tulsa. Now we have him at 75 on our board, coming off a 92 PFF grade. Daniel Jeremiah put him in the back end of his first round. I think he gave him to the Bengals or the Dolphins or something. He absolutely crushes people, but needs a little bit work in pass protection. So that combo is probably less intriguing for a team like the Bengals, who probably want to play, they want a pass protector first. But those are some of the names I would probably take a look at as other options, especially if you do get those two guards. And what you're doing in free agency is paying for a little bit more certainty.
Yeah.
And the Bengals are in a mode where I think you want to pay for more certainty, but also draft for the future all in one.
And it feels like somebody like Daniel Faalele is slipping down, relative to where people thought he might go earlier in this process. I think people are getting less comfortable with his, true movement skills and ability to pass block.
Heightists, really.
Yeah.
People are just...
And weightists.
If
you're 380, people start to get twitchy.
Yeah. I'm not there yet, but I'm 6'9", 6'10", like he is, and I think it's the height they're holding against him.
Maybe. But at one point, I think he was somebody that was appearing, at the bottom end of first round mocks. All of a sudden, he might be in play for the Bengals, like in the second round.
Yeah.
And just become like I'm fascinated by somebody of those dimensions playing generally. So I'm all for it.
So let's go get two guards. Let's draft another player. Simple. Fixed.
And actually,
offensive line.
So if you go to the PFF big board, and you click into Faalele, you click into his trends, you can see essentially where he's been drafted in the mock draft sim. And
now, all of that's available using the promo code NFL Pod, 25% off.
Correct. And if you go back, you can see that at one point his average draft position was in the 20s and in the 30s, low 20s.
That just could be Renner's fault to put him in the first round this offseason.
Sure, whatever. There was a period where he was being drafted between 25 and 30, and then it plummeted. And now it went to the 50s, the 40s, back down to the 50s and 60s, and now we just saw another little drop. And right now his average draft position is like 60. So all of a sudden, like, he went from a potential option at the bottom of the first round to being a potential option for the Bengals in the second round.
Yeah, and I think that's good to have those. To have some options. I think there is some good day two offensive line talent for the Bengals to take a look at. So a combination of free agents, draftable players. I think that's the basic gist of the offense. All their receivers are locked up for multiple years. The other issue is CJ Uzomah hits free agency, so you're going to want a tight end. I mean, I will say I've given Dalton Schultz to a lot of people, but it's because there's a few. This is why Dalton Schultz has a market if he doesn't get franchised by the Cowboys. If you run an offense where you expect your tight end to block a little bit and just work the seam and be a complementary piece, Schultz is a great fit like he did in Dallas. He'd be somebody to consider in Cincinnati. Plus, remember Gronk said maybe he'd want to play with Joe Burrow. Seems like all the Gronk hype is based off of this one comment about Burrow, and then Bills fans just want him because he's from the area. I'm guessing he's going to retire. But if you're the Bengals coming off a Super Bowl, could make big plays at tight end to round out that offense. Just another thought there.
I mean, if you're the Bengals and you're letting CJ Uzomah walk, just based off that one comment, you should absolutely call Gronk just to check. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Yeah, he's probably retiring and he's probably not playing anywhere. But on the other hand, he did name drop us. And if we could get Gronk, that would be incredible.
Yeah, we were in a Super Bowl. Joe Burrow's the closest thing to Tom Brady. You got Jamar Chase. Like, come do the super team down here in Cincinnati as well.
Yeah, there's a few interesting tight ends if they don't want to pay Uzomah. Mo Alley Cox would be an intriguing one. Gronk, obviously. O.J. Howard is a guy I'm always intrigued by as a reclamation project. Max Williams from Arizona, who is also, that blocking style guy that can do more in the pass game. There's plenty of options actually at that position.
Yeah, so that's probably the only other thing that needs to be attacked. Also, backup QB. So you got to look at backup quarterback. But defensively, first order of business is figuring out Jesse Bates, safety who didn't have his best season but had an outstanding playoffs. Still one of the more valuable safeties in the league over the last few years. he's technically hitting free agency. We'll see if they franchise tag him. He is definitely a tag candidate, but he's young. He's the core of that secondary. Last year they hit in free agency big time in Chidobe Awuzie, in Mike Hilton, the other cornerback spot. Eli Apple back to free agency after he had a run. He did have a run of good play, and then he became the butt of every joke coming out of the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
Because overall, Eli Apple's had a below-average career. He's been a below-average corner. And then the other place is Trey Waynes making a ton of money on that defense. Just he was a miss in free agency for the Bengals. So Bates, I would franchise him probably. Talk long-term. I'd be good with bringing him back. Good rangy free safety that does a lot. But that other cornerback position absolutely needs to be addressed as well.
Yep.
And if they I know everybody only wants to give them offensive linemen, and I did that in my mock draft. But back end of the first round could be a good spot for corners for the Bengals. Khair Elam from Florida. There are a few potential options there that could be good fits for the Bengals. So I don't think they're just looking offensive line at number 31 overall.
No, particularly if it works as you kind of sketched out, right? There's a step between that the second group, I guess, of offensive tackles and the third group. If you assume that Evan Neal, Charles Cross, Ike Ekwonu, those are the first tier, then guys like Ryman, Trevor Penning, those are more of a second tier. And then that third tier, there's much more of a drop-off. So if you're looking at this and you're Cincinnati and you're saying the first two tiers are probably gone by the time we pick. So there is that step. And the guys that we've just been talking about, maybe it makes more sense for those guys. I mean, it does make more sense for those guys in the second round. All of a sudden, our first round pick, just by virtue of the value of where these guys are slotted, ends up becoming cornerback more than offensive line.
Yeah, there's a lot of names there. Roger McCreary from Auburn, Daxton Hill from Michigan. I mentioned Elam, Kyler Gordon from Washington. He might have a great workout here. So I think offensive line and corner, certainly both in play with the Bengals' first two picks. They're also in this spot, Sam, where the roster's pretty good. It's not perfect. It's pretty good. They could just grab these best player available type of. I mean, you could go best player and maybe hit a position that's not a need, but will be in a year or two. So defensive line could absolutely use some depth. B.J. Hill hits free agency after he had a great run with the Bengals. We'll see if they want to bring him back long term. Larry Ogunjobi back to free agency, so they need some big bodies up front as well. So that'd be the other thing to consider. We've done some breakdowns on interior defensive linemen and said, look, it's not great either in the draft or in free agency. So probably go with the cheaper dudes, either lower on the free agent list or on day 2 or 3 as far as the draft goes.
Fixed.
Bengals are fixed.
That was easy.
That was easy. You know what else is easy?
What's that?
Winning money at DraftKings. Well, it's not that easy.
Great.
I don't want to promise that, but you can win. I'll show you how easy it is. Hoops fans, the latest offer from DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NBA, is too good to pass up. New customers can bet just $1 on any team and get $150 in free bets if they win. It's that simple. If Sportsbook isn't yet available in your state, you can still take your shot at a big payday. Everyone can play for huge cash prizes with DraftKings daily fantasy basketball contests. And DraftKings is giving all new customers a free shot at millions of dollars in total prizes with their first deposit. So download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now. Use promo code PFF. Bet just $1 on any NBA team and get $150 in free bets if they win. It's promo code PFF at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. Must be 21 or older. Minimum age and location requirements vary by jurisdiction. See DraftKings.com/sportsbook for full list of requirements and state-specific responsible gaming resources. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. See, that was pretty easy. All right, next up on the fixed list, Cleveland Browns. Where are we going with the Browns? The biggest stories this offseason for the Browns, Baker Mayfield. I don't think he's getting the contract because of the year we just came off of. Play out this lame duck season. If he's great, maybe you re-up him. If not, back to the drawing board at quarterback in Cleveland. But the biggest questions always, for now, are going to be receiver and defensive line. Defensive line in particular. Myles Garrett and Jordan Elliott are back under contract. That means guys like Jadeveon Clowney, Tack McKinley, Malik Jackson, Malik McDowell, Sheldon Day, all of these guys gone. So defensive line and receiver has to be the top priority here for the Browns this offseason.
Yeah. I mean, I think the Baker Mayfield thing, it became a pretty easy decision, actually, the longer it went on. the how much money is he going to get on this long-term extension contract became he's not getting that long-term extension contract, at least now. But we already have his 5th-year option picked up, so we're quote-unquote stuck with him anyway. So I think Baker Mayfield plays out this year on that. If he has a great year or a year that convinces him maybe he's got a little bit more left in the tank, they can franchise tag him. They don't even have to extend him at the end of this year. So I think we're just going to see Baker Mayfield play out for a while on a series of short-term type of deals and see if he does have more in the tank than we saw last year, which he should, realistically. So I think that part is easy. The only question then became, like, do they bring in anybody to challenge Baker Mayfield? Is his job actually under threat? And I don't really think it is. I think they already have enough money tied up in him. Case Keenum is there as a backup. It would be a very aggressive move for them to go after somebody else to come in to not even like 100% take his job, but to just threaten it and give them another option. It just feels like that's not a great allocation of resources.
I always envisioned Marcus Mariota being that guy.
Yeah, and that's
Marcus
the kind
Mariota
of guy, right?
being the guy that does to someone else what Ryan Tannehill did to him.
Yeah, but Mariota's, it sounds like he's actually going to command a decent chunk of money. Like, he's not going to come in as this really cheap reclamation deal and do what happened to him with Tannehill. So I just don't see a guy that makes a ton of sense for them to do that with. I think they'll roll with Baker Mayfield, expect him to be better this year the same way we expected him to be better last year, assuming this time he doesn't wreck his shoulder in like week 2.
The offensive line's looking pretty good. I mean, most of them, they're all coming back for next year. If you want to have a forward-looking approach, J.C. Treader and Jack Conklin, center and right tackle, respectively, they both head into their final years of their contract. They have 4/5 of their offensive line all making over $10 million per year.
Yeah.
They've invested heavily there. So now, what's the best play at receiver? I gave them Garrett Wilson from Ohio State. I thought about Jamison Williams, the speedster out of Alabama. They added crazy speed in Anthony Schwartz last year. Donovan Peoples-Jones, great size-speed ratio. Do you just turn this into this run the ball, run play action, then it's a track meet type of offense and go with the Jamison Williams and just create big plays left and right, and again, hope that that's the play for Baker Mayfield, this play action heavy downfield passing attack. Don't forget Nick Chubb, Kareem Hunt in the backfield. Say what you want about running backs, but those dudes also create big plays. I'm tempted by the Jamison Williams fit in the first round.
Yeah, Williams makes a lot of sense for the Browns. I like that as a fit a lot. Obviously, with Jarvis Landry potentially not being there anymore, agitating, not being happy, whatever you want to call that, they might need like a complete overhaul in that wide receiver core, like top to bottom. They might need everything. So Jamison Williams, I think, makes a ton of sense in the first round. I think there's also players that they can snag in free agency lower down that make some sense. Maybe, Marquez Valdes-Scantling. He's an interesting guy as well. I'm not sure what his market is going to be because he's got size. He's got all the reasons he should have been amazing for Green Bay, but never quite was.
Is he redundant to Peoples-Jones, do you think?
I don't think he's redundant.
Or is that just difficult, makes it more difficult on defenses to cover?
Yeah, I don't think he's redundant. Anyway, my point being that I'm not quite sure whether teams are going to buy into the freakish sort of things you can teach, right? Being 6'4", over 200 and running in the 4.3s. Or if it's like, well, if you had Aaron Rodgers as your quarterback and you couldn't be amazing, what are you doing here? Yeah. So if they can get him for a reasonably cheap deal, I think that would be an awesome signing. Russell Gage is a really good receiver that kind of gets overlooked.
That's what. So Baker had really good chemistry with Rashard Higgins, your buddy there. Is that and he didn't obviously with Odell Beckham, and maybe it wasn't actually that big of a difference, except we're coming from different expectations. Right. I don't know, but is the Rashard Higgins type? He's not explosive. He's a pretty good route runner. He just gets open, slot, outside, whatever. To me, that's Michael Gallup. That's Russell Gage. Are those the types in free agency maybe that you target? And then if you go Jamison Williams in the draft, now we're cooking as far as this offense. Get one just good possession plus type of receiver. I like Gage. I like Gallup potentially in that role in free agency, and then go the explosive route in the draft. I think that could be a nice, well-rounded receiving core at the end of the day.
Yeah, I think the thing being that they need all of it. Right?
They do.
So there's there's basically nobody in that current receiving group except Jarvis Landry that you would trust on a general basis. And if Jarvis Landry isn't going to be there, that means you need a complete top to bottom receiving group. Donovan Peoples-Jones has some incredible catches in his highlight reel, but hasn't, like, his yards per route run figure is awful because he actually played a lot.
Yeah.
And as much as every catch that he seemed to make was a spectacular one, he really wasn't making many catches for the amount of time he was playing.
I think you want him as a 3 or 4 option.
Right.
You know?
So, but there's danger in looking at the catches he does make and sort of saying, oh, this guy's got incredible potential. It's like, sure. But on the other hand, like, he actually played a lot. And for him to have been that relatively ineffective with the amount of playing time he actually had is pretty weak.
The other thing I'm looking at here, one of the debates in Cleveland, are they running too much 13 personnel? They relying on the tight ends too much. Should it become more of a receiver-driven offense? I don't know the answer to that, but to me, it's based off personnel. So your number 2 tight end, David Njoku, also a free agent. I don't think you're trying to sign him to a massive deal. As Brad Spielberger mentioned, the tight end franchise tag is pretty reasonable. Wouldn't hurt to have Njoku as part of this offense. Harrison Bryant, though, could probably step in and do a lot of the Njoku stuff. But will be interesting to see if they do go tight end in the draft or, a lower end free agent just to round them out. But I could see with Njoku leaving, presumably I could see there being a little bit more reliance on receiver. And I like that route maybe if you get a pretty good free agent and go early in the draft.
Yeah, the franchise tag it's like a bargain for tight ends. It's I think a hair over $19 million if you're talking about a franchise tagging a wide receiver, and it's a bit over $10 million if you're talking about franchise tagging a tight end. Now,
and most teams can handle like $10 million for 1 year. You can handle that,
right? The cap. What's the salary cap right now? Is way over $200 million, right? Yeah. $208 million off 2022. So if you're looking at a tight end, like, obviously there are players that it doesn't make sense for. On the other hand, there are players for whom like a $10 million 1 year deal is a freaking steal.
Sure.
If you look at some of the impacts that tight ends can have with guys like Travis Kelce and Mark Andrews and Darren Waller and George Kittle, these guys can make massive impacts. They can be your number 1 receiver. And if you're able to snag a guy like that for $10 million, that's an absolute bargain. Now, Njoku isn't that, but he's been a useful part of that offense, and $10 million to keep him around for a year might actually be a pretty good allocation of that money.
So offensively, I think we've given some options as far as receiver and tight end go here for the Browns.
This is the
point. Will that fix Baker Mayfield?
I mean, it'll fix him relative to last year. I'm not sure where his ceiling is, though, anymore. This is interesting for the Browns because, remember, they had a ton of draft picks and they had a ton of salary cap space, and then they hit, quote unquote, on Baker Mayfield, and they kind of threw all of that at the thing at once, right? We finally have our quarterback. He's on the rookie contract. Now's the time we build around him as fast as humanly possible, and then we get good. And it worked, kind of, right? They made the playoffs. They beat Pittsburgh. We thought this was a contending team, and then it all sort of fell apart. But for the first time, we're starting to see them in a position where they don't really they're tight on resources for the first time in a while.
Yeah.
Particularly with cap space and stuff. They don't have a lot of cap space. They don't really have the capacity to free it up with a bunch of contract restructures because a lot of those deals are either new or they've already eaten money on them. So for the first time, really, in a long time, the Browns are amongst the have-nots, not the haves, when it comes to spending space.
Jarvis Landry is the interesting one. He could free up over $14 million of cap space. He would be the one that you would look at. And look, Jarvis Landry's been a pretty good player, and he's a decent number 2 wide receiver. We're sitting here saying, do you go to free agency and go find a number 2 receiver, a Michael Gallup, a Russell Gage, or whoever that might be? So you could bring Landry back. But again, if he's upset and you're going to get some cap savings, that could free things up a little bit. And you deploy that in free agency or along the defensive line and kind of get back on track that way. It's not, you're right, it's not as open-ended as it's been in the past. I don't think it's dire, though.
No, they're not in trouble. But for the first time, they have a little bit less freedom than they've had in recent years.
What about this defensive line? Last year, I thought they did a good job slow playing Jadeveon Clowney. He came in, was pretty productive. He was fine. Did what he usually does, maybe a little bit less than from a production standpoint in the run game. But Myles Garrett needs some friends. Jordan Elliott hasn't developed. It wasn't as good as we thought he would be coming out of Missouri. So maybe his draft position was right. So you need your entire defensive tackle. I mean, you need multiple defensive tackles and probably 2 other edge defenders. A starter opposite Myles Garrett. A backup with Takk McKinley out. So, yeah, I mean, this draft-wise. So, again, this is like you have these 2 major needs, and you figure out, what do we do in the first round? What do we do in the second round? Is there more wide receiver depth in the second round? Both positions have depth, right? So I don't think there's a wrong way to do it. But Trayvon Walker from Georgia, David Ajabu, those guys are also in play. Jermaine Johnson from Florida State, those are edge defenders in play in round 1. And if you do that, then you circle back in round 2, maybe look at receivers. Jahan Dotson could be there for Penn State. I mean, it might be better to go edge first and then receiver second. But there's depth at both. We've mentioned this before.
Yeah.
But I think those are the places where they're probably going to deploy their draft picks early.
Right. And those are the 2. If any team is in a situation where, they have a couple of needs and one of them is receiver and edge rusher, and you're weighing up that choice, which do we take first? Which do we try and address in the second round? If you can choose where you attack, what position you attack in such a way that you are planning on circling back in the second round for a receiver or an edge rusher, I think you're doing it well. So if you're the Browns and the 2 positions you were looking at would be those 2, you're fine either way, right? Just pick your favorite player, because I think whatever you do, there are going to be good options for you in the second
round. Free agents, edge defenders. Is there, we've given Jerry Hughes to a bunch of teams, usually as like the hired gun, designated pass rusher. I'm not sure if that's a fit here, but I'd always, take a look at that. I think a guy like Emmanuel Ogbah, who I think is like on paper, Emmanuel Ogbah would be a good, return to play opposite Myles Garrett, but I think he's going to be too much money. Where are we going to go at edge? Is it just the draft, or is there a fit in free agency? Guys like Derek Barnett, they're just probably too much money for mid-level performance.
Yeah,
is what I'm feeling.
I mean, I'd try and bring back Clowney.
Clowney
for this. Well, Clowney for this run now of years has been trying to bet on himself for this giant extension that he thinks he's worth, and none of these 1-year deals have justified that to any team. So he just keeps taking the next one, and at some point he either has to lower his expectations and sign just a cheaper deal than the one he wants, or he's going to keep signing for 1 year, whatever the sum is. It's not a huge amount of cash, and he's worth that. Like, Clowney might not be the player that he thinks he is, and he might not be the player that people thought he was when they drafted him as high as they did, but he is a good player.
Right.
Particularly in stretches. Like, he can disappear for a while, but when he's on, he's a really important addition to a defensive line, and opposite Myles Garrett was having some great games this season. So if Cleveland can tempt him back for another one of those 1-year deals that, hey, prove it, justify your bigger deal, they should jump all over it.
So I agree with that. Let's say Clowney's going to come back. Defensive tackle. This is the 3rd straight team we've said that's a need. Ravens, Bengals, now the Browns. Again, it's not deep. It's finding the mid-level free agents to round out that roster. And maybe there's a day 2 fit in the draft as well. But I would rather, if I'm the Browns, I'd rather deploy those day 2 resources at receiver and at edge, as we've already said. The other places, Anthony Walker, coming off his career year at linebacker. They liked him, played pretty well, better than he had in previous years. Ronnie Harrison at safety. But they've got the depth. They've done a nice job building depth in that secondary. The guys like Grant Delpit can step in. So there's not a massive need in the secondary other than at some point they got to re-up Denzel Ward. Troy Hill's not really, he's only got 1 more year after his free agent signing last year. Probably adding some depth in that secondary as well. Something to take a look at. But there's not like a massive need in the back 7, really.
Right.
I think there are replacements for both of their holes. I mean, the Browns are really all defensive line, receiver, as far as needs go. And then I think they just have to sit there philosophically and say, what is the best way? I don't even know if it's to build around Baker Mayfield. How do we want this offense to look? Is it tight end driven? Is it receiver driven? Whatever it might be.
Yeah, I mean, you need a group of receivers. You need a defensive line outside of Myles Garrett. I think at that point, you're looking for contingency on the offensive line, both in terms of what happens if one of these guys goes down, gets hurt, and also they're all making huge money, and a couple of them are scheduled to hit free agency next year anyway. What's the succession plan? Because I think generally speaking, the Browns have done a really good job since the point where they had the money and the resources and, threw it at the problem. I think they actually did they did it in a smart way. They built a really good offensive line. Okay, they're paying for it, but it is one of the best offensive lines in the NFL on paper. They attacked the secondary with, real zeal, and we're seeing now they don't really need a secondary. They're in good shape there. They threw resources at wide receiver. Okay, those didn't work out, right? Jarvis Landry has been fine. Odell Beckham was a disaster during his time there. That I think was a sound move that just didn't work out. So generally, they've done a pretty good job of allocating those resources, but every move you make has consequences down the line, and now they're just sort of dealing with the reality of those, which is this offensive line we've paid for is now freaking expensive, and we need to start figuring out how we maintain a good offensive line. But yeah, the Browns aren't in a bad place.
Yeah, that stat I used about the Ravens having the most valuable offensive line in PFF history, the 2020 Browns were 7th. And so I don't hate that as a strategy. I think the more we think about this, we always talk about value positions. But if you're really good at a position group and then pretty good elsewhere, I mean, you can win a lot of games. And I think the Browns are in position to win a lot of games again. Just have to upgrade what right now on paper is a weakness. Defensive line, in receiver, and then hope Baker gets back on track. Browns have been fixed. We got breaking news here on the PFF NFL Podcast. Breaking news. I'm excited to announce for the third time this week that Manscaped has launched their Ultra Premium Collection. Believe it or not, it's for your not-so-private parts, but it's for a lot of stuff. We're talking leveled up hygiene routine with your favorite manly scent. It's an all-in-one skin and hair care kit for the everyday man. Covers you top to bottom, head to toe over at Manscaped. It's trusted below the waist. Now trust them with the rest. Join the 4 million men worldwide who trust Manscaped by going to manscaped.com for 20% off plus free shipping with the code PFF. We've got some rules and we have an order of operations. This is how you use your Ultra Premium Collection. You hop in the shower, scrub a dub that body with the Manscaped body wash. That's number 1. Number 2, lather your hair up with the 2-in-1 shampoo and conditioner. Keep your noggin toggin'. That's what they say. Dry off and spray on the hydrating body moisturizer to reinvigorate dry skin. That's number 3. Number 4, put on the Manscaped deodorant for obvious reasons. And then number 5, pop that Manscaped lip balm on. Did they send us this kit yet? Where's my kit? No one's out here kissing those chapped up lips. I need that lip balm. Getting dressed after is optional unless you're here at the Combine live with us. Wear one great scent all day long. It's all Manscaped. You can look at those. All that stuff that comes in the Ultra Premium Collection. And get 20% off plus free shipping with the code PFF over at manscaped.com. It's 20% off plus free shipping. The code's PFF at manscaped.com. The power of attraction is now in a bottle thanks to Manscaped. Love those guys. But they have not sent me my Ultra Premium Collection yet, so
True.
I want that.
Okay.
Go through all 5 steps. I'll order it. It's only 20% off. I'll get my own.
Do it.
All right, let's fix the Pittsburgh Steelers. Gotta admit, I can't stand trying to fix a team that doesn't have a quarterback. Because I don't love...
What are you talking about? They got Mason Rudolph.
The options. All right, you going to build around Mason Rudolph?
No, I'm not.
Former Mason Rudolph fan here. I think he was worth a... Certainly loved the shot that they took in the 3rd.
Yep.
I even thought he was maybe low first-round prospect. Hasn't panned out.
No.
The concerns that I had, maybe with his arm, actual velocity, natural playmaking, have been founded, I would say. So maybe Mason Rudolph isn't the guy. He's a good backup, good fallback option. Steelers got to make a move at QB. I'm in on the Malik Willis deal. I mean, if you want to draft him at 20, I'm in on that. Is he available at 20?
Is he available at 20? And if you're drafting him at 20, you're starting him day 1. Like, are you comfortable with Malik Willis starting for the Pittsburgh Steelers in week 1?
Maybe not for this year, as far as
But that's what's going to happen, right? They're not going to draft him at 20 and not play him. Like, Rudolph isn't going to start this season if they draft a quarterback in the first round.
So I stick to my guns here. If you draft Malik Willis, you're not drafting him for this year, right? I might start Mason Rudolph. What?
Mike Tomlin has never had a losing season. You think he's going to start Mason Rudolph all year?
Just take a forward-looking approach. Whatever you think. I'm not going to change on this. Whatever you think is best for Malik Willis's development. If you sit there, because you've got scouts, everybody's discussing this, and you write up the scouting report, and as an organization, you come to this consensus. Love Malik Willis. He's got a cannon for an arm. We could build a run game around him. We could do all these different things. Got to polish up a lot of his game. Got to be a little bit better with accuracy, but we can offset that with our scheme. And then you come up with this plan. Guy needs to sit and learn. That's the plan. If that's what you determine the player is, and you go ahead and draft him, then you follow what the plan was. You follow what the scouting report said, whatever your consensus was as an organization. And you don't come off of that just because of the 2022 season. You don't. You take a long-term approach. That's how you get good over time. It's not giving up on this season. It's saying what's best for the Pittsburgh Steelers. And it might be taking a step back in 2022, which, by the way, looking at it 50,000-foot view, you say, look, we just had incredible success since 2004, mostly thanks to Big Ben and the consistency that he brought to the table until the very end. We had incredible success. I mean, the other way you can look at it, too, is Malik Willis is not going to play any worse than Big Ben did the last 2 years, so we're actually going to be a playoff caliber team again, despite Malik Willis taking his bumps. But I would say it's okay for an organization that's had a very good quarterback since 2004 to say, look, 2022 might not be our year, but we're gearing up for 2023. It gives you 2 years to revamp that offensive line, to re-up Deontay Johnson, to make sure you've got the defensive pieces in place with TJ Watt and Cameron Hayward. You figure out, who's going to be there, and you've got a secondary to fix. There's a lot to fix in Pittsburgh. It's the same stuff that they needed to fix last year and the year before, right? So they're in this mess because they tried to make one more run at it and one more run at it, and they didn't take a long-term approach to anything. This is the year to take a long-term approach. Fix the secondary. Fix the offensive line. Get your quarterback of the future. Who cares about 2022? Mason, run the team until we think Malik Willis is ready.
Malik Willis could also wear number 10 as a full homage to Cordell Stewart. Just make the whole
and he's going to play receiver, and it's going to be slash.
Maybe there can be a package for him, a slash package.
Yeah.
Maybe.
I mean, look, if Mason's the quarterback, they probably are still in the playoff run, right? But if you think that the coaching is your big advantage, right? You're not going to have a horrible 2022 season, but maybe you can compete a little bit. But your coaching advantage will still be there in 2023, and hopefully with better talent. So you have 2 years. You think of this as a 2-year rebuild, because 3/5 of the offensive line is free agents, and they're not good anyway, so that needs to be addressed. You got to figure out which receivers are going to be there going forward. Chase Claypool, I don't know if they've soured on him or what, but Deontay Johnson's going to make a lot of money soon. And again, the whole secondary. And then you're getting a little bit older up front with Stephon Tuitt and Tyson Alualu and all that stuff. So a lot of work to do.
Okay, so you're drafting Malik Willis as your quarterback.
If he's available, sure, I'll do that.
That's your solution. How are you fixing the offensive line?
All right. So offensive line, I don't know if I like any of the starters.
Great.
Kevin Dotson's fine at left guard. Trey Turner they got for a year. Okora for it, right tackle's hitting free agency. I like Zach Banner as a backup, so he's good, hanging out there. If I've already used Willis as my first round pick, pick again until 52. Maybe there's a second round pick there that's available. I think if you grab a Malik Willis in the first round, offensive line and probably secondary are going to be the biggest priorities in round 2. There are some offensive linemen to draft there. As far as free agency, do you have any thoughts? Where to go there? Like, are there fits there?
I think they're another one of these teams that can be hammering at those free agent guards, of whom there are a ton. Like, I think it's a good situation to be in terms of being able to attack potential starters, immediate starters at guard that would upgrade a team like Pittsburgh. So
do the same thing the Bengals did.
Yeah, like there's plenty of those guys around, whether it's Alex Capo, whether it's Mark Lewinsky. Like, none of these guys are sexy picks. None of these guys are incredible players, but they're solid starters. And the Steelers haven't necessarily had solid starters on the offensive line for a while now. Austin Corbett is another one that like just grabs some of these guys.
I don't know what to make of Dan Moore, who played left tackle last year, was below average, but that was expectation. But guys do get better. I don't know if I want to live with him at left tackle moving forward. Like Eric Fisher in a vacuum, free agent left tackle, is intriguing. I do see Brad's projection at 3 years, $14 million a year. That's less intriguing. I don't know. If the market was sours on Fisher, I think he could be a good fit.
And you've also got to remember, every one of these offensive linemen is going to look worse next year because the quarterback is not going to be getting rid of the ball in 2.2 seconds every snap.
Yeah.
Like, Roethlisberger had the league's fastest average time to throw all year long by a significant margin. And he was still one of the most sacked quarterbacks in the NFL. Like, this offensive line didn't grade well, didn't look good, and did that despite the quarterback getting rid of the ball like lightning every single snap.
At the other tackle spot, I think Brandon Shell, right tackle from the Seattle Seahawks, could be a good fit there. Trent Brown could be a good fit there, the former Patriots tackle. So there are, those are the types of players I'd be looking at. Guys that are making $6 to $10 million a year by our projections that are going to fill two of your starting spots on the offensive line. But again, I'm looking forward, so I'm not just looking for Band-Aids. I'm looking for guys that are going to be here on 3 and 4 year contracts. Trent Brown can be that guy. Brandon Shell can be that guy. Fisher, if you get him for the right price. Those are the guys I would take a look at in free agency. And then Darian Kennard, the guy I mentioned earlier from Kentucky, I think would be awesome. Because the teams like the Steelers, the Dolphins, the Giants, the teams that need multiple starters, I take a guy like Kennard, start him at tackle if he moves in, but he can play guard as well if needed. That's the type of guy I take a shot on. So offensive line fixed in Pittsburgh.
Not feeling great about it.
Not feeling great?
No.
Why?
Because we haven't added very many good players to what was a bad offensive line.
That's what we're adding decent players. That's what you want to add. Decent players.
Yeah.
You know they're not going to break the bank for a Teron Armstead or anything like that. They're not going to go
I know.
crazy.
This has been the Steelers' problem for a while now, that like there's a lot of Band-Aids and a lot of stuff that isn't necessarily moving them dramatically in the right direction. But okay, fine. Malik Willis, he'll be there to run away from the pressure that will be raining down upon him.
Great. And again, I think they've dropped off defensively because of their back seven. Right? That's been their issue. You've got Minka Fitzpatrick coming back, Cameron Sutton coming back, but Terrell Edmonds, Joe Hayden, Ahkello Witherspoon, all hitting free agency. I'd grab Witherspoon if he can come back on the cheap. They traded for him, got a year of decent play out of Witherspoon. I'd bring him back. Hayden, I think, is past his time. Edmonds, they got 4 years of decent play out of him. Maybe it wasn't worth a first-round pick. I don't think he is worth bringing back on a big contract. So this is a place I think they need an influx of youth. This needs to be addressed in the draft, and this is why I think it's a 2-year rebuild, right? If you have to spend a premium pick or money or trade or draft or capital on a quarterback, but you also have to do that on the offensive line, multiple spots, in the secondary, multiple spots. It is a multi-year rebuild in Pittsburgh. You're also in a division. We're the 4th best team in the division, right?
Probably.
Bengals,
yeah,
Ravens,
quarterback.
Who knows with the Browns? You're the 3rd or 4th best team in the division. So embrace that for a year. Multi-year rebuild. Influx of youth in the secondary, on the offensive line, shrewd free agent moves. Find your quarterback. If they don't go the Malik Willis route, I think Marcus Mariota. See what he can do.
Marcus Mariota. Huh.
No?
I mean, I'd be interested in it. I wouldn't have a huge amount of confidence in its chance.
But that's
of
just
success.
to buy you time until you get somebody.
Yeah. I mean, I'd watch it.
I'd watch it. There we go.
I mean, look, if Mike Tomlin can come out of next season with another winning record with Marcus Mariota as his quarterback, I'll be impressed.
He almost did it with Duck and Rudolph.
Duck and Rudolph.
All right, they fixed?
Sure.
Can you bring a little more energy? I need you. I know we've recorded a whole
Look,
separate podcast before.
There's a lot of work that needs to be done for the Steelers, and I don't know how much of that we got done just there. But there's fixes they're going to get.
All I'm saying is my fix for the Steelers is not looking at this season. It's looking at a 2-year window where you have to. I'm going to trade down like crazy in the draft too. I'm accumulating youth at my positions of need. O-line, secondary, and, taking shots at quarterback. Mariota and Malik Willis. Let's do both.
Okay.
And see what happens there. Steelers are fixed?
Sure.
Are we on to the AFC West?
Yeah.
Who's the top team in the AFC West alphabetically? It's
Denver,
got to be the
right?
Broncos. Denver Broncos, first up. All right. What are you doing to fix the Broncos?
You're trading whatever it takes to snag Aaron Rodgers. That's presumably what the game plan was last year when the Aaron Rodgers news was dropped, like literally as the draft prepared to start. That was when it happened. Like everybody's pre-draft show became about Aaron Rodgers and the Denver Broncos, not about the draft.
Guilty.
And then it didn't happen. And Aaron Rodgers stayed in Green Bay and everything. Denver had no quarterback because they drafted Patrick Surtain with their first round pick. And they rolled into the year with Teddy Bridgewater and Drew Lock, and that was bad. So they have to get one now. You can't. You're now in a division that's even more difficult to compete because suddenly Justin Herbert looks as good as Patrick Mahomes, and Patrick Mahomes is still there, and Derek Carr is still there. So if you don't have any quarterback, like what are you even doing? So you automatically need a massive upgrade over the bridge quarterbacks that you had last year. And then B, like you can't keep hiring these guys and maintaining a decent roster and just having no answer at that position. So you're going to have to figure out a way of getting something spectacular done, whether it's drafting a guy in the top 10 in a year where it doesn't look like that's a tremendously smart idea, or if it's throwing the farm at Green Bay or Seattle or whoever for an elite caliber starting proven NFL veteran.
Yeah, what if you can't get Rodgers then? What is the best play?
Then try and do the same deal for Russell Wilson.
And then if that doesn't work,
I mean,
Deshaun Watson if things go well legally.
At some point,
if that doesn't work.
I mean, at some point, you basically have to draft a quarterback with number 9 overall if you're in that position. If you haven't been able to make any deal happen between these other teams with actual quarterbacks. Because I don't think you can go into this year with Jameis or Marcus Mariota or Ryan Fitzpatrick as your starter. You can't. Not after you might have been able to get away with it last year. Like if that was your plan and you'd been like, look, Patrick Surtain is special. We don't let corners like this just pass us by in the draft. We're going to snag him. We don't love any of these quarterback prospects, and we're going to tread water with Fitzpatrick or Jameis or Mariota or whoever, right? Okay, I'll buy that once, but you can't do it again.
Yeah.
You can't be like, that was the plan a year ago. It was disastrous, and the situation is harder this year because Herbert looks even better, so we're going to re-up. You have to make something special happen.
Oh, man. I mean, if they had drafted Justin Fields last year at this time, on one hand, you know what they have. You don't have Patrick Surtain, but you know you've got Justin Fields. You know you got a pretty good group of receivers, at least on paper. Most of your offense coming back. But you don't have the opportunity at Aaron Rodgers. You don't have like that 2-year window where maybe you can make this championship run with Rodgers. You like definitive championship run. Whereas Fields, you could make a championship run, and you know you have them, and you know what you're building around. But you're also sitting here a year later saying, am I getting Sam Howell at 9? Where am I going?
Yeah, I mean, it's a completely different situation if you have a Justin Fields. Like, you still might not be 100% sure if he's capable of going toe-to-toe with Patrick Mahomes and Justin Herbert and Derek Carr, but at least, like, at that point, you're pot committed. Like, this is the gamble you've taken, and we now need to do everything to make sure Justin Fields is an amazing quarterback going forward. You haven't taken that shot, and you just don't have anybody.
You're also looking at the Broncos from, like, here's what they've been since 2016, since Peyton Manning retired, which is a team without a quarterback and a team of bridge quarterbacks.
Which is also what they were before Peyton Manning arrived. Like,
I know.
That was the one, island oasis in a sea of desert that they found.
They tried Case Keenum, Joe Flacco, Teddy Bridgewater.
USFL superstar Paxton Lynch.
But at number 40, they have number 41 in the second round. What if they, because it's George Payton's in his second year and Nathaniel Hackett's in his first year. It's still a new regime. Mm-hmm. What if they exhibit patience still? And they pick in the second round whichever quarterback falls in the second round at 41, which might be the same exact pick they used on Drew Lock. Which, again, process-wise, I like, right? Take all the quarterbacks you want in the second round, because if one becomes Derek Carr, the payoff is awesome, right? Even Andy Dalton, right? You get a lot of payout off of that second-round pick. What if they exhibit patience once again and continue to build the foundation and take that second-round shot at a quarterback? Grab a closer to elite player at 9, quarterback second round. And still build this foundation for maybe next year. There's another guy that's on the trading block at quarterback. Kyler Murray.
It's interesting. There's a thing that happens when you draft a quarterback at the top of the first round, though, which is that the investment you made creates a buy-in that's different than if you just draft a guy in the second round or lower. And I can't remember who, but in recent drafts, we've had this conversation before about specific quarterbacks. And, like, theoretically, this guy is a second-round talent based off the flaws in his game or the development that he needs or the chances that it's all going to come together. But if you draft him in the second round versus the first, it's a different feel that everybody has. And not everybody is, like, literally, you might almost be better off overdrafting him by a round simply to get the buy-in that this is your future quarterback and we've actually made the decision and everybody needs to get on board and let's make this happen, as opposed to, yeah, but he's not actually that good, So
you don't want to sit on the fence and hedge like I do. Maximize value.
I'm just saying, so if you're Denver and you didn't get Aaron Rodgers, you didn't get Russell Wilson, you didn't make any kind of big move, you roll into the draft and number 9 rolls around, and you do the equivalent of the Patrick Surtain thing, you draft whatever, and then you take the quarterback, you grab a Desmond Ridder or whoever in the second round. Like, nobody thinks that guy's the answer. Everyone's just like, what you just wasted the opportunity, even if you'd taken Desmond Ridder, number 9 overall. That's what I'm saying. If you
just take, and we mentioned earlier, the Broncos might have their top choice for quarterback.
Yes.
If the Panthers don't pick one at 6, it could be Broncos get whoever you want at 9.
So I'm just saying, if they haven't taken a quarterback until that second round pick, and that's the first time they address the position this offseason, it looks ridiculous. And nobody buys into the idea that that guy is the answer at the position. Even if they drafted that exact same player at number 9 overall, there would be a different level of buy-in that, okay, that's their solution.
I'm just trying to build better players. You want to get buy-in on a guy?
I just think there's value to that.
Maybe. So who's that? We're going to take Sam Howell. We're going to draft Sam Howell at 9. On the PFF draft.
I want to trade whatever it takes to get Aaron Rodgers.
Okay. So after you get Aaron Rodgers,
yeah,
you have nothing else left to build around him.
Don't need it. I got Aaron Rodgers.
Perfect. You'd have to go the free agency route. They need 1 million linebackers. They need all the linebackers and all the edge defenders.
Luckily, several of them are theirs. So you can just bring them back.
Just bring back all your free agent linebackers.
I'd bring back
Alexander
at least
Johnson.
Johnson and Josie Jewell are both going to hit free agency. I would bring back at least one of those guys. Pick your favorite. I would bring back Jewell just because.
Agreed.
So,
defensive line needs some help, depth, and just impact players. Bradley Chubb at one edge. You don't have Von Miller, of course. They should look at Von Miller maybe in free agency.
Yeah.
I mean, if Aaron Rodgers is there, does that make Von Miller coming back to Denver attractive?
I mean, there's a gravitational effect that having a quarterback like Aaron Rodgers has to free agents. I mean, I think there's decent chance of Von Miller ends up re-upping with the Rams. But like if Denver snagged Aaron Rodgers, that would be a destination for people in free agency who might take less money to get that done.
Gronk, maybe that's where Gronk wants to go.
Maybe
He goes wherever Aaron Rodgers goes. Noah Fant and Gronk.
Maybe Gronk doesn't like Aaron Rodgers.
Well, he's got some teammates who come out and say, Greg Jennings and a few others. It was picks 64 and 96 that the Broncos got back for Von Miller, by the way. But those are some of the picks that you'd have to use in an Aaron Rodgers trade, perhaps.
Yeah.
Anyway, defensive line, linebacker, Kareem Jackson, the safety, is also hitting free agency, but they're looking pretty good in the secondary. You have Bryce Callahan, the slot corner.
And they've got some money.
Free agency.
Like even if Aaron Rodgers came on board, they have some money to play with in free agency and, chip away at that. It would still be a very good roster with a few pieces that need to be added. Now the question would be, do you need to give up a significant player to make that Aaron Rodgers deal? Like, are they going to have to lose a Cortland Sutton or, a Jerry Jeudy or somebody? Like, because part of the draw of, hey, you put Aaron Rodgers on this roster, boom, we're contenders.
Sutton, Tim Patrick, Jerry
Now,
Jeudy.
what happens if the trade is contingent on we're not making this deal unless a Sutton or a Jerry Jeudy comes in the other direction? That becomes more of an issue.
If they are going to spend money, are they one of the teams that might want to spend money on a Chandler Jones on the edge to be the guy opposite Bradley Chubb? Again, Randy Gregory potentially fits here. Melvin Ingram fits. Melvin Ingram fits as on any one-year deal for teams that are competitive. So again, if the Aaron Rodgers deal hits, Melvin Ingram could be the guy. Justin Houston, Jerry Hughes, all those one-year type of guys. Again, I don't want to be the team that invest multiple years in some of the mid-tier edge rushers like Emmanuel Ogbah or Derek Barnett. Uchenna Nwosu is an intriguing candidate to be the guy opposite Bradley Chubb. But I think free agency is probably the route here as far as edge defender goes. Go listen to our analysis on the first 3 AFC North teams, all the interior defensive linemen that are in play. The Broncos need to take a look at. And then, like I said, safety and slot corner are a couple of the places that need to be addressed, whether it's in the draft or in free agency.
And they're a team that should definitely be trying to draft edge rushers as well. With whatever picks they have remaining for the Aaron Rodgers deal that we're giving them. You keep saying, opposite Bradley Chubb. Bradley Chubb hasn't shown really anything at this level. Has been injured, has been not great when he's been playing.
True.
I know he has a year left in his deal. So they just need pass rush, period. Like Von Miller was their pass rush last year and they traded him away. From that point on, they didn't really have much.
K'Wan Williams, potential slot corner in free agency, or Chris Harris reunion. Get him back to Denver. Again, contingent upon Aaron. Everybody, all the veterans. You get all the old guys here if Aaron Rodgers shows up.
Bring Jason.
So Rodgers is the domino with the Broncos. If there's not that domino, Sam suggests just drafting somebody at 9 overall. I suggest drafting somebody in the Drew Lock. It was either Drew Lock or Dalton Reisner that went 41st overall. It was
Lock was 42.
Was Reisner? Then Reisner was 41. Because he went just ahead of him,
sure.
I think. So draft a quarterback in the Reisner spot, Desmond Ritter or whatever, and continue to play the long game in Denver. And they're fixed / we feel a little bit better about where they were.
I don't feel good about them at all if they haven't done anything until taking a quarterback at 41. They're not fixed at all if they've done that.
Most of the teams, again, this is why I don't want to.
That's why I fix them with Aaron Rodgers.
Stop calling me to run your team. I don't want to do it. It's a lot easier to do this for 32 teams and then move on.
I fixed him with Aaron Rodgers. You didn't fix anything with your
I'm in on the Aaron Rodgers
quarterback
thing
at 41 thing.
I said if Rodgers falls through, you don't make every deal that you want. I would make it happen though.
Look, if you're a billionaire, you don't take no for an answer. There's a price. What's the price? Here's the check. Fill it in. Slide it across the table. You fill in the numbers.
All right, I'll work for a team if we get Aaron Rodgers. But he can't win the big one. It's going to be a big waste.
He's got one.
That was like last decade.
Still.
It's over a decade
won
ago.
one. I mean, Dan Marino never won one.
True. Who wants Marino? All right, 3 more teams to fix here. AFC West. Kansas City Chiefs. How are we going to fix the Chiefs?
Well, they shouldn't take that much fixing.
No.
They were pretty good. And they didn't even play that well. That's how good the Chiefs are.
So, offensively, we'll start with that. Bring Orlando Brown back.
You want to bring him back?
Yeah, I'm sunk cost fallacy, dude. I mean, just get him back.
Okay.
So I think he's worth the price.
Is he?
Yeah.
That price is going to be monstrous.
Let me go to let me dial him up here on PFF IQ. I'll give you some data to back it up.
Is he worth the price if you don't factor in the idea that they've got Creed Humphrey and Trey Smith earning like $2 million combined?
No, I mean, I look, I've got the same concerns I had last year at this time, and why I probably wouldn't have made the trade is because if he makes $18 million a year, what's our projection for Orlando Brown? I keep using $18 million
because these are the decisions that you have to make as somebody with a quarterback locked up long term. We have him $21 million a year on average.
$21 million a year. So I'm going to work some magic in PFF IQ. I'll tell you if he's worth that compared to the market.
Okay.
And I believe he is. My concern is when you have $16 million a year locked up on Joe Thuney.
That's what I'm saying.
That's my concern. As far as what Orlando Brown has been on the field, like 13th most valuable tackle this year, top 8 last year. I mean, he has been that guy. And he answered the question, can he go from a run-heavy offense to a pass-heavy offense? Well, the bug's not fixed yet.
Like they have a very unusual degree of flexibility on the offensive line because essentially 3 guys are earning a combined $3 million next year.
Yeah.
Which gives you the very unusual capacity to spend an absolute boatload of money on the other 2 spots.
So I'm looking at all the tackles that are making $18 million, say $17 million or more. And if you just look at wins, WAR per season in that group, say of 11 players, Orlando Brown's 5th in WAR per season out of those players. So it's Trent Williams, number 1 in a different world, Ryan Ramczyk, Garrett Bowles, Braden Smith, and then Orlando Brown. Above guys like Lane Johnson, Brian O'Neill, David Bakhtiari, Ronnie Stanley. Now that's because of injuries, but I'm saying that's part of this equation too. Orlando Brown's been durable. He's played good football. So as far as does the market dictate that he should make $19 to $21 million, whatever it is? Sure, absolutely. For the Kansas City Chiefs, my concern, and again, why I probably wouldn't have made the deal last year, is I think receiver is the place that dictates your success in the future. Receiver is the place that dictates the success of the Kansas City Chiefs.
I'd be interested in if they can give him a deal that is shorter. Like he's going to be looking for that standard sort of 5-year, monster money, $21 million a year type of contract. What if his deal starts to look more like a Kirk Cousins kind of contract, right? Where you sign him for a shorter term deal, but that brings you up to the point where you're going to have to re-up Creed Humphrey and Trey Smith and maybe Lucas Niang if he hangs around. Because if he's earning $21 million next year, then your offensive line as a 5 is bringing in or taking home almost exactly $40 million as a group, which is actually pretty reasonable for an offensive line, right? 5 guys, $40 million total. That's pretty good going for a good offensive line.
So if you view it as a unit.
Yes, but at some point, and you're going to get that cheapness for a while because Trey Smith, Creed Humphrey were rookies last year. That's going to last for a bit. But at some point,
Brown's out. We're going to pay Humphrey and Smith. Yeah. Whatever it is.
So at some point in a couple of years, you're presumably going to need to re-up Creed Humphrey to a big deal or Trey Smith or whatever, and suddenly the math changes. Now, your offensive line that you were getting 5 guys for $40 million, all of a sudden your 5 guys are starting to cost you like $60 and $70 million, and then the math doesn't work as well. But if you can rig the deal in such a way that, hey, let's give Orlando Brown some more guarantees maybe, and maybe even a little bit more per year, and try and balance it so that we need his replacement around the time we're having a re-up for the other guys, then it makes sense.
Yeah, I'm down with that. So I'm using the stat that I used last year. So this is how well the Chiefs fixed their offensive line this offseason. The number I used earlier in this podcast. Of the last, since 2006, the most valuable offensive lines. 2019 Ravens are 1. The 2020 Browns, who I mentioned, are 7. This year's Chiefs are 8th. Okay? This is the worst offensive year that they've had with Patrick Mahomes at quarterback. I mean, this is what we said last year at this time. It's almost like you don't, and not that you don't want to be too good along the offensive line, but you don't want to invest too much because it just needs to be above average, above the minimum. So we don't want to invest too much. I kind of like your strategy though of this will keep it good. We'll get, the cheaper guys will become more expensive. We'll still have to figure out left tackle in a few years. But here's the other way I'm looking at it. If I'm the Chiefs looking for it, who are the guys next to Patrick Mahomes that are making all the money? Because like right now in 2022, Mahomes' cap number is $35 million. Chris Jones is $29 million. Fine. $26 million for Frank Clark. Tyreek Hill's 20. Joe Tooney's 17. So presumably they're going to have this top-heavy, 5 guys are going to make $15 to $30 million per year next to Patrick Mahomes, or 4 guys. Who are those 4 guys every year? And if one of them is Orlando Brown and one of them is Joe Tooney, how am I gonna create those explosive plays? Which, by the way, disappeared for a big chunk of the season this year. So I need room to either have another impact defensive player, because the defense also needs a lot of work, or I need room for my Tyreek Hill, Travis Kelce insurance plus the replacement for them. Because at some point, Tyreek Hill is going to lose a step. It has to happen, right? At some point, Travis Kelce is going to lose a step, and I never want Patrick Mahomes to experience not having great playmakers, even if they're not Hall of Famers, but not having great playmakers. You can't have that.
I mean, Tyreek's got quite a lot of steps to lose before it becomes an issue.
I know, he's going to lose like 3 steps and still be the fastest player in the NFL.
Yeah. Although, did you see that the Pro Bowl race? It was like him.
When he jogged?
It was like him, Nick Chubb, Micah Parsons, Trayvon Diggs, I think. And yeah, so he was like laid out of the blocks, wasn't paying attention or something, and basically jogged the entire length of the thing. It was still only like a yard behind everyone else.
Yeah.
Who were sprinting, their ass off to try and win this thing.
Must be nice to be that fast.
I mean, in a real, just pure test of speed.
Could he be a legit 4.19 guy? Like, could he be under 4.2?
Maybe, yeah. Like, his speed is insane.
Does it even matter? Like, does that, like, because we use the 40 because there's perspective, right? Yeah. And if you just look on the field, it feels like he runs 4.15 or 4.18 or whatever. Anything under 4.2 is like the difference that he's making up.
And he also, it does it easily. Like, it doesn't look hard ever. I mean, like I said, he was jogging and he was basically the same speed as Trayvon Diggs, who isn't slow. And when you watch him in games run away from people, particularly on those like deep crossers, he breaks away, he separates a couple of yards, and then the guy behind him is sprinting his ass off to try and get that back and never does. And Tyreek is just kind of jogging across the field looking for when the ball might arrive, and the guy behind him who's doing like putting his life force into chasing him down can't chew back any of that separation.
All right, so we're gonna go Orlando Brown. I kind of like the 3-year deal is what you're suggesting, if possible, if that's what he wants to do. He'll hit the market again soon. That works in the Chiefs' favor. I need to have a third receiving option. It's got to happen.
What does it need? What type of receiver?
So this is what I'm contemplating in my head. Is this another speed guy? Because much like the Niners do, or much like the Chiefs have done, you just load the field up with guys that are scary. Load it up with scary guys. Valdez-Scantling comes here, right? Or is it a Chris Olave who probably doesn't last to 30? Or do you get just a really good route runner? Like, what's been missing when the Chiefs have to go to Byron Pringle or Demarcus Robinson? Do you just want a reliable, he's going to catch the ball, let Tyreek and Kelce make the big plays? I need a reliable, catch the ball, possession plus type of receiver. Do you invest in a Michael Gallup? Maybe that's the guy that's better for this offense, which is reliability rather than another, athletic freak.
Yeah, and I think if anything, the way teams are defending Kansas City right now, which is taking away those explosive plays, I don't know that you want to add a guy whose primary trick is those explosive plays. Because if those aren't there, what does that guy bring to the table anymore? So if
Russell Gage, is it Russell Gage?
Yeah, like if you have a Marquez Valdez-Scantling and suddenly you're like, well, those deep shots aren't there anymore, you just need to be a receiver underneath. Yeah. That guy's, he's not useless, but he's not the one you want. Whereas Russell Gage can win at all levels of the field and is good at everything. He, I think, would definitely be a good player there. Christian Kirk would be an interesting guy, but Tyreek Hill spends enough time in the slot that maybe you don't want to do that. Yeah. There's a little bit of redundancy there. Gallup would be good. I wonder if Gallup becomes too expensive given the wide receiver market.
He's probably too expensive for the Chiefs, yeah.
But those are options, right?
Draft-wise, Dotson from Penn State, who we've mentioned before, he could be a good fit. He doesn't have to work from the slot, but he can work from the slot.
I mean, Sky Moore feels like a perfect addition.
Sky Moore, David Bell from Purdue could be a guy. But I think early they should look for that next receiver. And even just the depth chart dictates that, right? Because we mentioned like the athletic freak guy. You've got Mecole Hardman, right? He's the guy that they got a couple years ago. So get a complementary piece to those guys. Gage would be intriguing if they go the free agent route. But either way, that needs to be addressed. Defensively, Tyrann Mathieu hits free agency. Charvarius Ward, who's been really underrated. He's been their most valuable corner over the last few years. You play a lot of press man. I think there's some teams that I think are going to like Ward in free agency. Melvin Ingram, of course, hits free agency. He just was 1 year flyer, essentially. And then the Frank Clark situation, who's been graded at 54.9 last year. He's just not lived up to his ridiculous contract. Mm-hmm. So, quick replacements there.
Yeah.
Try to bring Matthew back, potentially, or do you not want to invest?
I think that depends where the money goes. Matthew's a really good player, and you definitely want to have him back on this team. But if that contract is going to get crazy, I don't know if you want to go to that level. The Frank Clark thing is tough because you're saddled like such a big amount of money stuck to him, and like he's just not good. So if you can get rid of Frank Clark, getting rid of Frank Clark and eating a dead cap hit might actually be a beneficial way of doing things.
You're going to save $12.7 million and have 13.6 dead money.
Yeah,
it's not ideal, but might be
honestly
better path.
Might be worth doing.
Might be a better path to the future. Back into the first round, I think I gave them Kyer Elam, the corner out of Florida. I think he'd be a good fit. I think Jermaine Johnson out of Florida State would be a good fit to be that Frank Clark replacement. But they need to get better on the defensive line. They're also Jaron Reed, Derek Nottie, also hitting free agency. And this is the tricky part about just focusing on the big money players and the stars. I think a lot of their team building effort over the years is going to have to be they got to hit in the draft on just like the way the Rams are, hit in the mid rounds, and you got to have players who contribute. And that's how the Chiefs are going to stay afloat at the top of the AFC. But I think they've got room for one more impact defensive player if they let Tyrann Mathieu walk and or release Frank Clark.
Yeah, and maybe releasing Frank Clark is the thing that gives you the cash to keep Tyrann Mathieu. Like, maybe it's those are the kind of decisions that they need to be making.
I like that they have 10 draft picks, so there's a lot of different places to hit. We haven't completely fixed them, but we've theorized where they should be deploying resources.
Yeah,
in Kansas City. Fixed. All right, Las Vegas Raiders, and then we got the Chargers to wrap it up. Are we building around Derek Carr in Vegas for the 90th time? Let's discuss.
Just because I think they are. Like, if it was me and you doing it, maybe there'd be a different answer. But yes, I think the Raiders are building around Derek Carr, for better or worse.
All right. Has this season changed what we thought about with the Raiders, right? Last year it was like, hey, their offense looks pretty good, and you've got Carr running it, and they're good enough. Offensive line needs some help, right? Things have changed a little bit there. But defensively, they overachieved as far as pass rush goes. They got a good year from Casey Hayward. Nate Hobbs emerged as a good player. But on paper, I'm not looking at this defense. Like, the defense still needs probably the most work, right? Back seven needs help with Hayward hitting free agency. Don't know what Hobbs is going to do in a new system. He was really, as a rookie fifth rounder, he played the Desmond King role, where Desmond King was a rookie fifth rounder, stepped into the slot in Gus Bradley's system, which apparently, I don't know, you just get productive play there, but I don't know how good Hobbs really is going forward. They need a lot of help defensively.
Well, that's part of this, which is interesting, that I think the defense overachieved last year relative to where we thought it would be. It was a disaster before that, and Bradley comes in, you get this different system, and suddenly players like Casey Hayward and Nate Hobbs are playing dramatically better within this defense than other players, or that they would have been presumably in a different system. A guy like Max Crosby has a breakout year and suddenly looks like a superstar, and all of a sudden that defense actually looks okay. Now, they've cleaned house, right? Everybody's been a new regime. Everybody's coming in. It's a new system. Now you're looking at the personnel again. You're like, well, are any of these players any good? Max Crosby, presumably, that was, even though he beat up on a lot of bad players, when he faced good players, he still looked pretty unstoppable. So you're reasonably confident that Max Crosby, at least, is legit. But outside of that, like, who else is an impact playmaker? Maybe Nate Hobbs is, based off what we saw in his rookie year. Maybe Trayvon Merrick is. Like, we're not long on guys that we have a proven track record in any system.
Crosby's also last year's contract. Yannick Ngakoue, who did get off to a great season, great start to the season. Was on mute the entire time.
Nicely won. Nice work.
Could you hear? I wonder if people could hear me through your mic. Maybe.
Probably wasn't
Thanks,
a great
Tyler.
audio experience if they could.
As I was saying on mute, Yannick Ngakoue, Crosby's on the last year of his contract. Yannick Ngakoue, last year of his contract. He was fascinating case. A pretty good pass rusher again last year, especially early. His run defense was so bad. We gave him a 28 grade. And so bad. And run defense does matter when it comes to player value. So bad that he had negative WAR. So they got to get better on the edge because you can't be that bad in the run game. And that's pretty much Ngakoue's history. So defensive line, defensive tackle. The secondary needs help because, Trayvon Mullen's probably their best returning corner besides with him and Hobbs. But Mullen's got only one year left. I think they got to spend a lot of time. It's a multi-year project here. And they're a playoff team.
Yeah.
That's what makes it difficult, right? I think the biggest thing the Raiders need to look at, and it's easier with the new regime, is to say, yeah, we were a playoff team, but you cannot treat this like a playoff team that's close. This is a multi-year deal as well, much like the Steelers. You have a defense to overhaul. You have an offensive line that needs upgrading. And now, because of the, what's his name? Henry Ruggs tragedy, you have more to address as far as receiver goes.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's about priorities. Like, you can't fix everything in one off season for the Raiders. There's too much that needs addressing, even if you were able to nail down all the starters. There's depth in various spots. What you do need to do is to figure out where you're going to throw all the resources primarily. And I think the first thing they need to do is to repair that offensive line, which was one of the biggest issues last year, is that even when things were going well, that offensive line was bad and was going to be a problem for Derek Carr at some point during the year. Obviously, the things that happened with John Gruden and Henry Ruggs made everything look even worse as the season progressed. But like, step one, I think, needs to be fixing the offensive line. Like, Alex Leatherwood was one of the worst offensive linemen in the NFL last year. He was completely disastrous at right tackle, became just mildly problematic at guard. So right. I don't know if they still have confidence in him. Can he be your right guard going forward? Whatever you make of Leatherwood, they need a right tackle that can start. They probably need a left guard that can start. So another team with maybe 3 positions on the offensive line that needs a starter.
I don't know if it's the right play or not, but if they really don't like Leatherwood, they're not tied to him at all.
Yeah, I mean, he'd be an interesting trade candidate for them. Like, right. What will the team... I mean, okay, we probably overdrafted him where we drafted him. Most people wouldn't have. On the other hand, there were a lot of people that liked Leatherwood. So maybe he does have some value. Maybe you can get a second-round pick back for him.
Yeah, and you'd lose a little bit of money in the deal. But again, we're taking that's for this year mostly, right? You'd lose a little bit of money this year and next year if you traded Leatherwood, but maybe he's attractive to another team that had that second-round pick, second-round grade on him where he probably should have gone and is willing to give up a second-rounder for him. Tackle could be in play in the first round. I gave them Andrew Booth, the cornerback out of Clemson. I think corner or tackle could be in play at 22 in the first round. Bernard Ryman, the Central Michigan tackle that we mentioned a few times, that could be his sweet spot as far as value goes.
Yeah.
But I'm with you, man. I think get that offensive line in order. This is what makes it tough about the Derek Carr situation, right? He's got 1 year left on his contract, and is he going to make $40 million? Fine, let's say we do that, but also understand he's where Cousins was with the Vikings too, right? We keep making that comparison. Cousins was this mid-tier, upper mid-tier quarterback in the middle of a transition in Minnesota, and that leads to we might make the playoffs, we might not. And that's where the Raiders are right now.
Yeah.
I think they get much better.
And they're in a tougher spot because of that division, right? With Mahomes and Justin Herbert. And you're immediately looking at two very good teams every year thinking, wow, just making the playoffs is going to be tricky. But the thing I think that potentially differentiates Derek Carr from Kirk Cousins now is that I think you at least have confidence that Carr can go on a run where he goes toe-to-toe with those guys and maybe knocks off 3 or 4 of them in a sequence and takes you to a Super Bowl. I'm not sure anybody has the confidence that Cousins can do that at this point, even if in a vacuum they might be very similar players, and actually Cousins has the better grades over the last couple of years. I just think that's what the Raiders are banking on. It's, in an ideal world, you don't want to pay Derek Carr $45 million a year. But A, he's probably closer to that than people want to give him credit for, and B, it's like the Matthew Stafford deal. You're not paying for the baseline. You're paying for what the potential is. He can go on a run and string together 5 games of better play than his baseline. And I think Carr has definitely shown the ability to do that, even in disadvantageous situations.
So we re-up Carr. Got to add more receiving talent somewhere. I mean, offensive line needs to be addressed, as I mentioned. And I think, corner, I think has been a multi-year issue there, which, again, I think they solved short-term with Casey Hayward, but he's not there anymore. So what else we got to do here with the Raiders?
Well, we got to actually put some names to this. So you heard we give him Ryman, I think, makes a lot of sense in the draft.
Yeah, we give him Ryman in the draft or Booth. So you take one of those potential places or spots.
I think they'd be an interesting fit for a Laken Tomlinson in free agency, or an Andrew Norwell, or somebody like that. James Daniels is one of these intriguing names that a lot of people like because of his age and versatility.
I like Daniels because, again, the teams that I keep saying it's a 3-year project, give me the James Daniels or Connor Williams of the world. Younger guards who their best football still might be ahead of them, to be honest. Travarius Ward at corner, who I just mentioned from the Chiefs, I'd be intrigued by, especially if they do end up playing a little bit more press man over there with new defensive scheme. But Ward on the outside, opposite Trayvon Mullen, with Hobbs playing in the slot, I could see that in free agency. And they need somebody to not allow Yannick Ngakoue to play the run 300 times again. And Ngakoue is that much of a liability in the run game that it doesn't matter that he rushes the passer, but he has to become just a designated pass rusher. I mean, JPP is not the same player anymore. He might be a good stopgap, but again, I'm not thinking this year too much with the Raiders. If they're thinking this year, get JPP on a 1-year deal to take some pressure off of Ngakoue, maybe. But I think the player opposite Max Crosby needs to be addressed as well.
Yeah.
That's where some of those edge defender could be in play in first round too.
It's also where, again, somebody like Melvin Ingram is just a stopgap, just a guy that can come in and chew up some snaps for a while and be, offer something. Like Ingram was good against the run and the pass. That wouldn't be a bad play if they can get him for a decent amount of money.
I mean, all of the teams that are, I should have mentioned this with the Steelers too, but Obo Okoronkwo, the edge rusher from the Rams, still pretty young, underutilized over the last couple of years. He's had a lot of pass rush success in limited time. He's a guy I would just take a shot on. Multiple teams that, if you hit on him and he becomes a part of your system over the next couple of years, I think there's a good payoff there as well. Good?
Yep.
Raiders fixed. One more team to fix. We're fixing everybody. Los Angeles Chargers. This is the one that's probably, by the way, I gave the Chargers Ryman in the first round at right tackle just to really put a cherry on top in the offensive line overhaul. I don't think they're desperate there in the offensive line. 3/5 looking good. Left tackle, left guard, center. Right guard is an opening now with Ode Ibushi hitting free agency. Brian Bulaga, older and also in the last year of his contract. Storm Norton, free agent, backup. Right tackle's a spot. But if the Chargers just go right tackle in the first round and then address it, that's a good, get the foundation set and then go build everything else. First order of business, though, is going to be Mike Williams, right? Receiver, hitting free agency. Do you franchise tag him at least for a year to keep those pieces around Herbert?
Maybe. kind of feels like Josh Palmer can do an awful lot of what Mike Williams can do.
Yeah.
And that price tag for a franchise tag receiver, $20 million essentially, is a lot, particularly with Keenan Allen already making a lot of money. Suddenly you're locking up $40 million, in those two positions. It wouldn't cripple them if they did it, but I'm not sure you want to. I would be tempted to take that risk, let Mike Williams hit free agency, maybe bring in another one of the sort of lower tier free agents and draft somebody and just rely on my ability to patch that up.
The Chargers are number 3 in effective cap space, so they've got stuff to play around with in free agency. So if you let Mike Williams go, I think you probably look at other receiving options beyond just Josh Palmer. I don't want just Josh Palmer and Keenan Allen.
No,
or Justin
but
Herbert.
That's what I'm saying. You can bring in another lower level free agent. You can bring in somebody in the draft, obviously. Like every year you should essentially be drafting one wide receiver because why not? You're not going to be rolling into the season with just Keenan Allen and Josh Palmer.
He wasn't there in my mock draft, but I think Austin Gale gave him to him. Jameson Williams, the Bama speedster that we've given to multiple teams too. But man, him and Herbert's 65-yard bombs, Williams could be on the receiving end of that. I would like that as a compliment to Keenan Allen. Whether Mike Williams is back there or not. Imagine Mike Williams for 1 year and Jameson Williams. Huh? That's how you compete with the Chiefs. That's how you win.
Yeah.
So we're starting on the offense here. I think if they don't draft a right tackle, they could go the cheap route. This could be a good spot for just Riley Reif for a year. Morgan Moses fits everybody, but Riley Reif, I'll mix it up with Riley Reif.
Yeah.
My boy Cornelius Lucas, who's like a swing tackle all the time, but could he be the start? He gets put into starting spots all the time. Cornelius Lucas could be a good starting tackle. He'd be an upgrade, I think, over Storm Norton, what you got last year. You just want a guy that's not going to get wrecked by Max Crosby and whoever they put over there, and Von Millers, right? So I think Lucas could be an option there.
Yeah, they're in a tough spot because technically Brian Bulaga is still there, supposed to be the starter, but Brian Bulaga's injury history at this point is so extensive that you can hardly rely on him being the guy. But I wonder if Brian Bulaga ends up being a cut casualty. Just get rid of him at this point rather than, because you're in a tough spot if you're like, let's start bringing in right tackle contingency as opposed to we just need a right tackle.
Yeah, that's true.
So you might be better off just ripping the Band-Aid off that one and saying, sorry, Brian, it was a good plan, but it didn't really work out. We're going to go in a different direction and just try and find a starting right tackle at that point rather than, because somebody like Riley Reif is a nice addition, but it's like, do you really want to commit to him as your starter versus he's a great contingency option for Bulaga? I'd say just, rip the Band-Aid off, go and find a real right tackle.
Okay, go find a real right tackle. Got to find a real tight end too. Jared Cook and Donald Parham both. Parham might be back actually, but Cook free agent. Wouldn't mind a nice go-to tight end for Herbert too. So again, we go back to this free agent list, the Dalton Schultzes of the world, and maybe Gronk wants to play with Justin Herbert. All right, if Gronk wants to play, he's got some good QBs to choose from, but I think he's too attached to Tommy. To go somewhere else.
He had the choice. He could have said Justin Herbert. He didn't.
But he said Burrow.
Joe Burrow.
Oh, so then the Burrow versus Herbert debate is really final here because Gronk picked Burrow. Zach Ertz, give him Zach Ertz as a pass catcher for a year, potentially a tight end. David Njoku,
sure. Njoku is a really intriguing player if he makes it that far. If he gets out in the open. Evan Engram is another guy that I think might actually be a better player somewhere other than New York. And, freed from that and paired with Justin Herbert, all of a sudden that could be pretty exciting.
I like that. Let's give him Ingram. 2 years, $9 million though. That might be iffy, but that's what Brad projected for him. But again, the Chargers have some money to play around with there. But I'm going to give him Jameson Williams in the draft. Give him a free agent tackle. I say Riley Reif. You want something better? Is there someone better?
It's
Morgan Moses.
Morgan Moses would be your guy. Orlando Brown, if he hits free agency and if you can convince him to play right tackle. Right tackle's
I'm
not
not
a great
spending that type of money.
Right tackle's not a great spot. The other guy that's like a cheaper version, but it's a sort of solid stopgap, like Bobby Massey, wouldn't be a bad player to just come in there and plug a spot.
I forgot. I gave him Cornelius Lucas too. So we've got options at right tackle.
Yeah.
You got the speed at receiver. We're not bringing Mike Williams back though.
I mean, I wouldn't hate it if you do, but I don't. It's a lot of money.
I'm tempted for a year. Anyway. Now, the real thing, though, that needs to be addressed is the defensive line for the 90th straight year. So we just started offense first, but last year was the year of fixing the offensive line for the Chargers. I think this year is the year of fixing the defensive line. And this is, the argument that was on Twitter or the discussion about Jordan Davis, the monstrous 6'6", 340-pounder, being a value play there at 17 for a team like the Chargers that plays two high safeties, meaning you got to stop the run with fewer players. Does that up the value of a Jordan Davis, a nose tackle, or a Folo Fatukasi in free agency for the Jets? I think this scheme does need that player because even in with the Rams, you did have like Greg Gaines. You had those types of players. A'Shawn Robinson playing that role this year. So I think Jordan Davis could be in play at 17. I'd probably rather go the Fatukasi route.
But don't you think that, like, simply by being better inside, you achieve the same thing without it having to be a 6'6", 340-pound monster? Like, Aaron Donald,
it doesn't have to be him.
Aaron Donald is one of the best run defenders in the NFL because Aaron Donald lives in your backfield.
True.
And he has the same effect through dramatically different means than plugging a old style two-gapping run stuffer nose tackle in there, right? Either way, you can't really run in that area, but for a different reason. So the Chargers' issue with stopping the run isn't necessarily that they don't have any great giant run-plugging nose tackle. It's that their defensive line outside of Joey Bosa sucks.
Right.
So if you give them a player that can actually make an impact in there, that can cause some problems and wreak havoc, that does the job.
So you're describing Devontae Wyatt, Jordan Davis's teammate, and just say, look, because I think the two-gap stuff gets overrated, right? You're not, because most of the time guys are playing with a shade. They're not like legitimately two-gapping. But a guy like Jordan Davis takes a legitimate two players to block him, whether he's playing a two-gap style or not. But Devontae Wyatt, his teammate, who's higher on the draft board for us at 25, is he a better play at 17? He's not as good in the run game. That'd be my concern. He's another guy that doesn't handle double teams very well, but can live in the backfield and destroy people. So it's worth a debate. I do think they'd rather have just a big hoss up there holding the point of attack, helping the linebackers and all that stuff. So I think a true nose would help, whether it is Davis, Travis Jones, the second rounder from UConn, or Fatukasi in free agency. I think grabbing one of those guys would be smart.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of those.
And other people.
Yes. I think there's a lot of players in free agency generally that could come in and be dramatic upgrades for a defensive line that isn't good, like Sebastian Joseph Day from the Rams. I think would be a good addition there. A guy like Sheldon Richardson, who everybody gets frustrated by, who never lasts in one spot for more than a couple of years. Like, Richardson could come in and make an impact. He's that kind of player. And then, my point would be I would not let the fact that our run defense is bad swing me that dramatically in terms of who I think is the better player at that position in the draft.
I agree.
So if they're in that spot and you're talking about, how much should we inflate the draft stock of a Jordan Davis because we need that spot, I wouldn't say much at all because you need the same position in a different style does you just as much good, in my opinion.
The other guy I would think about, Ndamukong Suh, whose grades continue to get worse. But I think it's because he just plays too much. The guy's played over 800 snaps every year of his career. It's insane, his workload. Can you bring Suh in, because he's in hired gun territory in his career, could you bring Suh in and say, look, you're playing 400, 500 snaps, please. You're not going to be the every down guy. You're going to be an early down guy. And if you're just focused on this one role as part of our defensive line rotation, you could play all across the defensive front, play the run, and stay fresh instead of playing 800 to 1,000 snaps like he keeps doing. So I think I would explore all those options if I'm the Chargers.
I think with Sue, we might have just reached the point where he's declining.
He also could just be too old.
Yeah.
But we haven't seen it. I do this every year.
Right,
I mean, I've been doing this since like 2013 with our free agent list. Here's this guy who played too many snaps. What if you tapered it down?
I think if that was true, we would probably see him play better earlier in the year. You know, like when he's fresh.
Maybe, but I think it's a game-to-game. Like, there's a difference playing 50 snaps a game and 25 when you know you're playing 25 snaps a game too.
Yeah, but it just feels like that would be something that should mount as the season goes on. And when you're like game one, you shouldn't be out of gas already, even if you are playing 50 snaps.
But it's not a gas thing. It's like an effort thing too. It's like a relief pitcher, Sam. A relief pitcher can come in and just let it go and throw as hard as he wants. Whereas a starter has to pace himself. You know? Look, we've been here all day. They're asleep in the booth. There's no baseball talk here.
There we go.
A relief pitcher can just let it. So move Sue to the bullpen. Okay?
Right.
He is I wrote it in our board here.
Uh-huh.
What's his role on the free agent board here? PFF.com. 25% off using NFL Pod.
What did you write?
Rotational interior defensive lineman. He's not a starter. He's rotational defensive lineman.
At least you didn't put bullpen.
I moved him to the bullpen.
Yeah.
Too. But rotational interior defensive lineman. I said a 500 snap season could extract better production as his overall grades have declined in each of the last 4 years. Anyway, Sue could be an option to return to Los Angeles, but this time with the Chargers.
Okay.
In the secondary, the other, just edge rusher in general too. Echena and Wosu hits free agency, as does Kyler Fackrell. Jerry Tillery has been moved all across. He's been a disappointment as a first rounder. They need a pass rusher to go with Joey Bosa. I wonder if they're a team, would they invest in Von Miller? Von just played the same system across town. With the money that they have, I wonder if they would look at any of the high-end edge defenders. Von Miller's number 1 on our board. Chandler Jones, number 2. Ingram, make his return with Bosa. Clowney, if he wants to move elsewhere. Randy Gregory, I think all those guys could be in play because you need somebody to help Joey Bosa there. In addition to all the interior guys we keep talking about.
Yeah, it feels. I don't know that they go after those those top kind of guys, but I wonder if somebody like Jerry Hughes is more of an intriguing player for them. Jerry Hughes, who's still getting it done at his age and can still provide some real pass rush, but probably doesn't come with the price tag of the higher end guys. They definitely need to address that, and they've only got so many draft picks to do it. So I would imagine, like, Jerry Hughes to me is like buying yourself a guaranteed 50 pressures in a season next year, which for a lot of teams is a pretty valuable thing. Okay, it's not a long-term solution, but neither does it prevent you from blooding a rookie or a young guy that you want to get snaps. It's just, you're not going to be stuck for 50 pressures because he can bring that.
Arden Key's another guy that doesn't fit the bill of like early down run stopper at all. But I think if you don't add Jerry Hughes, you can't add Jerry Hughes and Arden Key, I don't think, because Key's more of a pass rush specialist. But if you want to get more pass rush in there, Key had that breakout season playing on the interior a lot for the Niners. He could be another guy to get in there as well. But I think the Chargers have to attack this in volume, much like the Browns, who we talked about earlier on the show. Different body types, different styles. Their entire defensive front needs help and needs work. The last thing I'll say, too, corner underperformed last year with Asante Samuel and Michael Davis. Chris Harris now hitting free agency. Probably adding some depth there would be a good play. And then, oh, by the way, get the player locked up. Heads into his last year of his contract. Number 33. Get that man a long-term deal, will you?
Yeah.
And maybe just move him to corner or do more stuff with him.
I would love to see that. I don't know if it's necessarily a good idea, but I would love to see it.
It'd be one thing if all of the stuff that came out of camp every year was like the players covering this, fifth receiver or whatever. Yeah. It's always him covering Keenan Allen, top 5 route runner in the NFL.
One-on-one and winning.
Yes. Feels like he could be Jalen Ramsey.
Yeah.
In a zone-heavy scheme, right? You don't want him always playing man. Like, there's probably a reason why the player plays safety. But he could play corner.
But I think a lot of that was I think we had this conversation. It might even have been about the player. If not, it was certainly about Jalen Ramsey, that when you have a guy that's capable of doing this many things, what is the most valuable thing to do with him? Is it playing to the strength of being a jack of all trades? Or is it saying the most valuable thing in the defense, in the back seven is playing outside cornerback, therefore you will play outside cornerback? So maybe the two different teams have taken different interpretations of what that is. And even with the Rams, or throughout Jalen Ramsey's career, that opinion has changed. It's gone from being you play outside corner because that's where the value is, to all of a sudden now his team is saying, no, where you're most impactful is we're going to move you inside where it's harder to avoid you because you're going to be in on more plays. And that's how we maximize the impact you make. So maybe the Chargers have looked at the player and decided that the way you can make the most impact is by playing this safety role where you move everywhere. Whereas arguably you're a more valuable player if you just play outside corner and eliminate whoever's out there, even if it means you disappear from games for an extended period of time.
I would love to see that.
Yeah.
I don't think corner's an issue. Michael Davis is okay. I think Asante Samuel takes a step forward in year 2, but I'd be intrigued by seeing number 33 outside. Anything else you want to add to the Chargers? I have one thing. Do you have anything else?
No. What do you got?
Most important thing the Chargers need to do to improve. And I don't know if this is something you can do, but they got to try it anyway.
What's that?
They're going to study every single 4th and 1. They're going to get better on 4th and 1. Study every 4th and 1 around the league. And I don't know if this is an edge to be had around the league because it sounds ridiculous, right? I always joke with you. There's a difference between a game plan and a hope, right? We're going to score early. That's a hope. Right? That's not a strategy. Can you strategically say we're going to get better on 4th and 1? Because with the number of times the Chargers went for it, there was a bunch of times they were running outside ISO routes and these low percentage plays. But if you're going to go for it X% above what the rest of the league does, can you find an edge to actually be better on those plays? Can you practice those plays more?
Yeah.
They're the high leverage plays. If the Chargers are just X% better on 4th and short, which they run more than anyone else, they're going to win that many more games. So whatever you can do to be better on 4th and short, and offensively and across the league, offensively and defensively now, because you got to defend those plays too. I don't know if that's an edge to be had, but it needs to be explored. How do you get X% better on 4th and short, or just short yardage in general, we'll say?
Yeah, I mean, at the very minimum, they've come out and they've repeatedly said, we are going to be playing like this as long as the coaching setup is as it is. So if you're going to be going for all of those 4th and shorts, or 4th downs, period, they weren't even going for 4th and short half the time.
4th and everything.
Right.
4th and 3.
So if you're going to go for that many 4th downs, you need to make sure you're pulling out better plays than some of the ones you were. So absolutely, they should be, if they're not going to change the frequency and volume of 4th downs that they are going to go for, and I'm not saying they should definitely be looking at what plays they're calling on those plays.
Huge offseason for the Chargers. They've got the 3rd most effective cap space. They have 11 draft picks, and they have Justin Herbert, right? So as far as a team that can make a massive move this offseason, Los Angeles Chargers are right up there. We just fixed them. Man, Jameson Williams, get that speed over there. Love to see that pick. That's it, man. A crisp 2+ hours. You're out of gas. You're done. You're absolutely done.
Yeah. I mean, we're done. We're finished. We fixed teams. It's
been
over.
Here for half a day. You want to do one more show?
Oh, I've got to do it daily as well, don't we?
Yeah. Yeah, we're going to pre-record it daily.
Sweet.
Keep the energy up, Sam. Keep it up. Don't forget, guys, go check out our pin tweets at PFF_Sam, at PFF_Steve. The charity drive is still going. It's a competition. Sam raising money for kids with cancer. I'm raising for men in recovery from addiction. So we appreciate everybody that's already donated and appreciate everybody that will be a part of that with us. Again, we'll be here next week going through all the NFC. We'll get back to the mailbag as well. And we just appreciate everybody for tuning in, being a part of this, and following all of our Combine coverage as well. And the one last thing, 25% off, NFL Pod. Go check it out. Draft guide, all the draft coverage. NFL Pod, 25% off. Everything at PFF.com. All right, we're out. See you next week.